My stepdaughter leaned across the white linen tablecloth and smiled the same sweet smile she used when she asked for her first car. The greatest gift you can give me for my wedding is if you do not come. You are not my real dad, you are just Jeremiah. My biological father will walk me down the aisle. My wife, the woman I had supported for 25 years, sat next to her sipping a $2,000 bottle of wine I was paying for and said absolutely nothing. Her silence was louder than a scream. I did not flip the table. I did not yell. I simply paid the bill one last time and initiated a plan that would leave them with nothing but a wedding dress and an eviction notice. Before I tell you how I destroyed their world, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been treated like a walking ATM by the people you love. I stood at the entrance of Le Pierre wearing my 20-year-old tweed jacket and comfortable work boots. The maitre d' looked past me, his nose wrinkling as if he smelled something foul. "Deliveries are around the back, old man," he sneered, blocking my path with a laminated menu. I opened my mouth to correct him, to tell him I could buy this entire building with the interest from just one of my offshore accounts. But a hand grabbed my arm. It was Austin, my future son-in-law. He laughed, a dry, hollow sound that grated on my nerves. "Good one. Jerry here actually thinks he is dining with us." He did not correct the man. He did not say, "This is my father-in-law." He just steered me to the table like I was a senile uncle who had wandered out of the nursing home. I sat down, feeling the plush velvet of the chair, a stark contrast to the hard wooden bench of my work truck. Vanessa, my stepdaughter, sat opposite me. She looked beautiful, I had to admit. I paid for that dress. I paid for the teeth straightening when she was 12. I paid for the skin treatments. I paid for the university degree she never used. Austin sat next to her, looking at his reflection in the silverware. He came from old money on the East Coast, or so he claimed. To me, he just looked like a man who had never calloused his hands a day in his life. I reached for the menu, scanning for the chicken special. I always taught Vanessa the value of $1, even if she never learned it. She snatched the menu away from my hands. "Oh, please, Jerry, stop embarrassing us with your penny pinching tonight. This is a celebration." Austin snapped his fingers at the sommelier. "We will have the Chateau Margaux 1982, $2,000 a bottle." I protested gently, mentioning that the house red was perfectly fine. Austin poured a glass and shoved it toward me, splashing a few drops on my jacket. "Drink up, Jerry. Try to cultivate some taste before you die. It is on you anyway, right?" He winked at Vanessa. She giggled. That sound used to warm my heart. Now it sounded like a cash register opening. I took a sip. It tasted like vinegar and disrespect. "So about the wedding," Vanessa started. She did not look at me. She looked at her diamond engagement ring. Another thing I had heavily subsidized, though, Austin took the credit. "We made some changes to the guest list." I nodded, expecting a seating chart issue, perhaps putting me next to a distant cousin or near the kitchen. I was used to being pushed to the margins. "No, it was much worse. Austin's parents are flying in from the Hamptons," she continued. "They are very particular people, Jerry. They think you are the family driver." I froze. The fork halfway to my mouth lowered slowly. "The driver," I repeated. "Yes," Austin chimed in. "It is just easier that way. Look at you. You dress like a gardener. My parents are refined. We do not want to have to explain your whole blue-collar background to them. It would be awkward for everyone, especially for you. You would not be able to keep up with the conversation. Politics sailing the market. You know, sophisticated things." I looked at my hands. They were rough, scarred from 40 years of electrical contracting, from building a business empire from nothing, from fixing the wiring in the city's skyscrapers while Austin was still learning to tie his expensive Italian shoes. I kept my face neutral. "So what are you asking, Vanessa?" She took a deep breath, and then she delivered the blow that severed the last thread of my patience. "So here's the thing. The greatest gift you can give us is staying home. You are not my real dad. You are just Jeremiah. You have been great with the checks, really, but for the pictures, for the image, it just does not work. Tyrone is coming." The name hit me harder than a physical blow. Tyrone, her biological father, the man who spent 10 years in prison for armed robbery, the man who never sent a dime, the man whose bail I posted secretly 3 times so Vanessa would not know her father was a felon. "Tyrone," she said, her eyes lighting up. "He will walk me down the aisle. He looks the part. He has swagger. He is cool. Austin thinks he adds a bit of edge to the ceremony. I felt a coldness spread through my chest, starting from my heart and freezing my veins. I turned to Loretta, my wife of 25 years, the woman I pulled out of debt when we met, the woman whose mother was currently in a private care facility that I paid $5,000 a month for. Loretta, are you hearing this? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Surely she would stop this madness. She would slap Vanessa. She would demand respect for the man who had given them everything. Loretta swirled her expensive wine. She did not meet my eyes. She looked at the diamond bracelet I bought her for our anniversary last month. Honey, don't make a scene, she whispered. Vanessa just wants her day to be perfect. You know how Austin's family is. They judge. Just be a good provider and let it be. Tyrone is her blood. You have to respect that. A good provider. That is all I was to them. A resource. A utility bill that paid itself. A walking wallet with no feelings. I looked at the three of them. Vanessa checking her phone, Austin smirking at the waiter, Loretta refusing to look at me. The love I thought we shared was a transaction, and the contract had just expired. I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. The waiter dropped the leather check folder on the table. $800 for a dinner where I was told I was unwanted. Austin did not reach for his wallet. He just tapped the folder. Get that for us, will you, Jerry? And don't forget to wire the venue deposit tomorrow morning. $80,000. Or no wedding. And hey, make sure the transfer clears early. We have a tasting at noon. I looked at Austin. I looked at the bill. I pulled out my black card. Not the one they knew about. The one connected to my private trust. I placed it on the tray. It is the last time, I thought. Enjoy the wine. Enjoy the steak. Because tomorrow you will be eating ashes. I walked out of the restaurant without saying a word. The cool night air hit my face, but it did not cool the fire in my belly. Austin called out after me, his voice mocking. Don't forget the transfer, Uncle Jerry. I got into my truck. My old reliable Ford. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. They wanted Tyrone. They wanted the cool dad. They wanted the image. And they wanted my money to pay for it all. I started the engine. I did not go home. Instead, I drove to the one place where I kept the truth, my garage, but not to park, to watch. I had installed a new security system last week, hidden cameras and microphones because I had noticed some of my vintage watches going missing. I pulled up the feed on my phone as I sat in the dark driveway. What I saw on that small screen made me want to vomit. Inside my living room, sitting on my Italian leather recliner, was Tyrone. He was wearing my silk robe. He was holding a glass of my 30-year-old whiskey, and Loretta was sitting on the arm of the chair laughing. Don't worry about the old fool, Loretta was saying, her voice clear through the high-definition audio. He will pay the bills. He always does. He is desperate for us to love him. Once the wedding is paid for, we will put him in that home on the other side of town, the cheap one. Austin says we can declare him incompetent if we all testify he is losing his memory. Then the house is yours, Tyrone. Finally. Tyrone laughed, a deep, raspy sound. That is my girl. Vanessa is smart. She got a rich boy, and we got a golden goose. I cannot wait to kick him out of his own bed. I turned off the phone. I sat in the darkness of my truck, the engine humming softly. My hands stopped shaking. The sadness evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. They thought I was the fool. They thought I was the weak, senile old man who just wrote checks. They had no idea that before I was a contractor, before I was a provider, I was a man who survived the streets with nothing but my wits. I put the truck in reverse. I was not going in there. Not tonight. Tonight they could celebrate their victory. Tonight they could drink my whiskey and plan my demise. Because tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. I had a meeting at the bank, and when I was done, the only thing flowing into their accounts would be dust. I drove to a motel on the outskirts of town, a place with flickering neon lights and thin walls. It was a far cry from my 4-bedroom colonial house, but it felt cleaner. I lay on the lumpy mattress staring at the water stain on the ceiling. I thought about Vanessa as a little girl holding my hand on the first day of school. I thought about Loretta crying on my shoulder when her mother got sick. All lies. All an investment scam, and I was the mark. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Austin. Reminder, $80,000. 9 a.m. sharp. Don't disappoint us, Jerry. I typed back a single thumbs-up emoji. I would not disappoint them. I would surprise them. I closed my eyes and slept the sleep of a man who has nothing left to lose and everything to take back. The next morning the audit would begin. and it would be brutal. The garage door hummed as it lowered, sealing me inside the only space in the world that still felt like mine. The scent of motor oil sawdust and old concrete usually calmed me, grounding me after a long day of dealing with suppliers and city inspectors. But tonight the air felt heavy, stagnant, as if the house itself was holding its breath. I had told Loretta I would be working late at the site reviewing the blueprints for the new municipal center downtown. It was a lie. I had finished hours ago, but the thought of walking through the front door and facing the silence, or worse, the fake smiles, turned my stomach. Instead, I came here, to my workshop, to the truth. I walked over to my workbench, pushing aside a stack of invoices to reveal the small high-definition monitor I had installed just last week. I felt a pang of shame for even putting it there. A man should trust his wife. A man should trust his home. But lately, things had gone missing. My vintage Rolex, a gift to myself after landing my first $1 million contract, had vanished from the nightstand. Loretta claimed I must have misplaced it at a job site. Then a few bottles of rare bourbon disappeared from the locked cabinet. I was old, but I was not senile. I knew exactly where I put my things. I tapped the screen, waking up the system. The feed from the living room camera flickered to life in crisp 4K resolution. The sight that greeted me made my knees buckle. I had to grip the edge of the workbench to keep from sliding to the concrete floor. There in the center of my living room sat Tyrone. He was sprawled out on my custom Italian leather recliner, his feet propped up on the coffee table, boots still on. He was wearing my silk robe, the navy blue one with my initials JS embroidered on the pocket. It was a robe I saved for Sunday mornings, a symbol of the rest I rarely allowed myself. Seeing it on him, seeing the fabric stretch across his chest, felt like a physical violation. In his hand he held a crystal tumbler. I recognized the amber liquid swirling inside immediately. It was the Pappy Van Winkle I had been saving for my 70th birthday, a bottle worth more than the car Tyrone drove. He took a long, greedy gulp, some of it spilling down his chin and onto my robe. He wiped it away with the back of his hand, laughing at something I could not yet hear. I fumbled for the volume knob, my fingers trembling with a rage so cold it burned. I turned it up. The sound of their voices filled the small garage, echoing off the metal tools hanging on the walls. "This is the life, Ty. This is the life you deserve." It was Loretta. The camera angle shifted slightly as she walked into the frame. She was wearing a dress I had bought her for a gala last year, holding her own glass. She sat on the arm of the chair, her hand resting casually, intimately on Tyrone's shoulder. I stared at the screen, my breath catching in my throat. I had been married to this woman for 20 years. I had pulled her out of debt. I had paid for her mother's funeral. I had given her a life of comfort and dignity. And here she was pouring my whiskey for the man who had abandoned her and her daughter 2 decades ago. Tyrone swirled the glass, looking around the room with a sneer. "It is nice, I will give you that, but it smells like old man in here. We are going to have to redecorate once we kick him out. Get some leather that does not look like it belongs in a museum, and maybe a bigger TV. This 70-inch is cute, but I want the theater experience." Loretta laughed. It was a sound I had not heard in years. A girlish, carefree giggle that she never used with me. With me, she was always tired, always complaining about her back or her headaches or the stress of managing the household staff. "Don't worry, baby," she cooed, running her fingers through his hair. "Jerry is predictable. He is a workhorse. He will pay the bills, sign the checks for the wedding, and then we will execute the plan." I already spoke to Dr. Evans about his memory lapses. I told him Jerry has been forgetting to turn off the stove, that he gets confused about where he is. I stood in the garage paralyzed. I had never forgotten to turn off a stove in my life. My mind was sharp enough to calculate load-bearing ratios in my head, sharp enough to manage a multi-million-dollar investment portfolio without a calculator, but she was planting the seeds. She was building a narrative of decline. Tyrone took another sip, smacking his lips. "You are a genius, Loretta. I knew you were playing the long game." I leaned closer to the monitor, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The long game. The words hung in the air, heavy and toxic. Loretta took a sip of her drink, her eyes gleaming with a malice I had never seen before. Or perhaps I had just chosen not to see it. "Honey, I have been playing the long game since the day he walked into the diner and ordered coffee. I saw his truck outside. I saw the company logo. I knew he was building something. I was drowning in debt. Vanessa needed braces, and you were... away. Away." That was a polite way of saying Tyrone was serving a 10-year sentence for armed robbery. "I needed a lifeboat, Ty," she continued, her voice devoid of any guilt. Jeremiah Stone was the perfect mark. He was lonely. He was desperate to be a hero. He wanted a family so bad he did not care that the daughter was not his. He did not care that the woman came with baggage. He just opened his wallet and started paying. And he hasn't stopped for 20 years. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. It was hot and angry. I wiped it away furiously. I had loved her. God help me, I had truly loved her. I thought we were partners. I thought the quiet evenings we spent together meant something. I thought her gratitude was love. But it was just the relief of a parasite finding a host. Tyrone laughed a deep, raspy sound that grated on my nerves. The old fool is pathetic. He thinks he is Vanessa's dad. You should hear him trying to give her advice. Work hard, Vanessa. Save your money, Vanessa. He actually thinks she listens to him. She listens to the cha-ching of his bank account, Loretta sneered. That is all he is, Ty. He is a resource, a utility. Like the electric company or the water department, you pay the bill, you get the service. But you do not fall in love with the meter reader. Tyrone leaned back, stretching his arms. Well, the meter is about to run out. Once the wedding is paid for and Vanessa is set up with Austin's family, we make our move. The nursing home brochure is already in the drawer. The cheap one, Loretta, not the one he sent your mother to. We need to save that money for us. I watched as Tyrone reached up and pulled Loretta down for a kiss. It was possessive and gross. I turned away, unable to watch. I looked around my garage, my tools, my workbench, the things I had built with my own hands. They wanted to take it all. They wanted to put me in a state facility surrounded by strangers while they lived in my house, spent my money, and laughed at my stupidity. My eyes fell on a small framed photograph on the shelf above my drill press. It was dusty, covered in a fine layer of grime. I reached out and wiped it clean with my thumb. It was taken 22 years ago. A rainy Tuesday in November. I was standing outside the elementary school holding a bright yellow umbrella. A tiny Vanessa was standing next to me, gripping my hand so tight her knuckles were white. I closed my eyes and the memory washed over me, vivid and painful. Tyrone had been arrested the night before. The police had raided their apartment. Loretta was a mess, hysterical, unable to function. She had called me the contractor who had fixed her porch a week earlier, begging for help. I went to the school. I stood in the pouring rain for 45 minutes because Vanessa was afraid to come out. She thought the police were coming for her too. When she finally emerged, she looked up at me with big, tearful eyes. Are you going to leave too? She had asked. Her voice was so small, so broken. No, baby girl, I had said, wrapping my coat around her shoulders. I am not going anywhere. I got you. I had kept that promise. I had paid for the therapy to help her deal with the trauma. I had paid for the private tutors when she fell behind. I had taught her how to drive. I had scared away the boys who didn't treat her right. I had sat in the front row of her college graduation, cheering louder than anyone, while Loretta complained that the ceremony was too long. I had been her father in every way that mattered. And Tyrone. He had sent one letter in 10 years. One letter asking for money for the commissary. And now she wanted him to walk her down the aisle. She wanted the man who broke her heart to give her away, while the man who healed it was told to stay home. I looked back at the monitor. Tyrone was pouring another drink. Loretta was laughing at something he said, her head thrown back. They looked comfortable. They looked entitled. They looked like they had already won. I felt a shift inside me. The sadness, the heartbreak, it began to harden. It calcified into something cold and heavy in the pit of my stomach. It was no longer grief. It was resolve. They thought I was just a contractor, just a man who knew how to hang drywall and wire a circuit breaker. They forgot that to survive in my business, to build an empire from nothing in a city that didn't want to see a black man succeed, you had to be smart. You had to be ruthless. You had to know when to cut your losses and when to demolition the whole structure. I was not going to storm into that living room. I was not going to shout and scream and give them the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. That is what they expected. They expected the emotional, desperate old man. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. My hands were steady now. I scrolled through my contacts until I found a number I had not called in 5 years. It was a Swiss number, Geneva. It was 2 a.m. there, but I knew he would answer. Henri did not sleep when his biggest clients called. I pressed the call button and held the phone to my ear, watching Tyrone spill another drop of my whiskey on my rug. The line clicked. Monsieur Stone, a crisp, accented voice answered. This is unexpected. Is everything all right? No, Henri. I said, my voice low and even, matching the hum of the garage door opener. Everything is not all right, but it is about to be corrected. I need to initiate Protocol Omega, Y said. There was a pause on the other end. A heavy, pregnant silence. Protocol Omega was the nuclear option. It was the fail-safe I had set up 10 years ago when I first started making real money just in case everything went sideways. It was a complete asset freeze and transfer. A way to move liquid capital out of the country and into untouchable trusts within seconds. Are you certain, Monsieur Stone? Henri asked, his voice losing its professional detachment for a fraction of a second. Once we begin, the domestic accounts will be drained. The credit lines will be severed. The automatic payments will stop. It is drastic. I looked at the screen one last time. I watched Loretta stand up and model her dress for Tyrone. I watched him nod approval like a king surveying his subjects. I am certain, I said. Drain it all, Henri. Leave the joint checking account with exactly what it had when I met her. 0. Understood, Henri said. It will be done by the time the banks open in New York. I hung up the phone. I took one last look at the intruders in my home. Enjoy the whiskey, Tyrone, I whispered to the empty garage. It is the last drink you are ever going to get on my dime. I turned off the monitor. I walked out of the garage and into the cool night air. I did not look back at the house. I got into my truck and drove away. I had a wedding to cancel, and I had a bill to collect. The audit was just beginning. The bank lobby was quiet at 8 in the morning, a stillness that usually brought me peace, but today felt like the calm before a demolition. I sat across from Mr. Henderson, the branch manager who had handled my business accounts for 15 years. He looked pale. He kept shuffling the papers on his mahogany desk, avoiding my eyes. I knew that look. It was the look of a man who had found a structural crack in a building foundation and did not know how to tell the owner the house was sinking. Let us see the personal statements, Henderson. I said, my voice flat and echoing in the empty office. I want to see the joint account activity for the last 6 months. He slid a thick stack of paper across the desk. I put on my reading glasses, the ones Vanessa used to make fun of, calling them my old man goggles. I began to scan the lines. It was a massacre. Grocery bills that doubled, cash withdrawals at casinos. But then my finger stopped on a transaction dated 3 weeks ago. $50,000. Wire transfer. The memo line read, "Emergency roof repair." I stared at the numbers. I felt the blood pounding in my temples. I built that house. I installed that roof myself with my own crew 10 years ago using slate tiles with a 50-year warranty. There was no leak. There was no damage. There was no repair. I pulled out my phone and typed the routing number of the recipient into a search bar. It did not go to a roofing company. It did not go to a contractor. It went to Velocity Motors, a luxury dealership 3 towns over. I closed my eyes and the image from the garage camera flashed in my mind. Tyrone bragging about his new wheels. Loretta had bought her ex-convict lover a muscle car with my retirement money and labeled it home maintenance. It was not just theft, it was an insult to my trade. She used my own profession as a cover for her betrayal. I looked up at Henderson. Who authorized this? Your wife, sir, he said, his voice trembling slightly. She came in with a signed authorization letter. She said you were at a job site and the roof had collapsed. She was very convincing, Mr. Stone. She was crying. Of course she was crying. Loretta could cry on command. She had cried when she told me she loved me. She had cried when she promised to be faithful. Her tears were just another tool in her belt. There is something else, Henderson said, and this time he did look at me. His expression was grave. A week ago, Mrs. Stone came in again. She wanted to make a change to your life insurance policy. I froze. My life insurance. A policy worth $3 million intended to secure her future if I passed. She wanted to add a secondary beneficiary, he said. A Mr. Tyrone Davis. She claimed he was a distant cousin who was helping care for you as your health declined. The heir left the room. They were not just spending my money while I was alive. They were planning for my death. They were betting on it, perhaps even hoping to accelerate it. That conversation in the garage about the nursing home was just the beginning. If I was out of the way, Tyrone would not just get the house. He would get the jackpot. I stood up. My chair scraped against the floor. Henderson flinched. Mr. Stone, should I call the fraud department? No, I said, buttoning my tweed jacket. Not yet. If we freeze the accounts now, they will know I am onto them. They will scatter like roaches when the light turns on. I need them all in one place. I need them comfortable. I walked out of the bank into the blinding morning sun. The city noise washed over me, but I felt completely detached. I was a ghost walking among the living. A ghost with a vengeance. My phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a notification, a new email from Austin. The subject line read, "Wedding logistics, urgent action required." I opened it right there on the sidewalk. It was not a request. It was a demand. A manifesto of entitlement written by a man who had never earned a dollar he did not inherit. Jerry, see the attached invoice list for the final vendor payments. These need to be cleared by 5 p.m. today, or we lose the reservations. Do not embarrass us by dragging your feet like you did at dinner. Item 1, imported Ecuadorian roses, $15,000. Item 2, crystal champagne flutes, vintage rental, $8,000. Item 3, live 12-piece swing band, $10,000. Item 4, custom ice sculpture bar, $5,000. The list went on. 30 items, totaling nearly $80,000. It was a ransom note. And the tone. It was the tone of a master speaking to a disobedient servant. He did not even call me Dad or Mr. Stone, just Jerry. The wallet, the driver, the nobody. I read the last line of the email. My parents are arriving tonight. Please ensure the funds are transferred so we can focus on hosting them. Try to stay out of the way. I looked at the phone screen, and for the first time in 24 hours, I smiled. It was a cold, terrifying smile. They wanted a transfer. They wanted me to clear the accounts. I would give them exactly what they asked for, but not in the way they imagined. I sat on a park bench overlooking the city skyline. I could see the cranes working on the new high-rise I had consulted on. I had built so much in this city. I had laid foundations that would last a century, and in my own home I had let termites eat away the beams until the roof was ready to collapse on my head. I dialed the number for Henri, my contact at the private bank in Zurich. It was time. Henri said when he answered. "Initiate the protocol." "Protocol Omega," Sir Henri asked. "We discussed this last night. Are you absolutely certain? This will liquidate 99% of your domestic assets. The checking accounts, the savings, the investment portfolios connected to your social security number. It will all be moved to the blind trust under your mother's name." "Do it," I said. "Leave exactly $485 in the joint account." "Why that specific amount, sir?" "Because that is the cost of a one-way bus ticket to her sister's house in Alabama plus a meal at a diner. I want her to have options when the dust settles." "Understood, sir. The transfer is initiating now. By the time your local bank processes the daily ledger, the funds will be in the Cook Islands. Your cards will be declined. The automatic payments will bounce. You will be effectively destitute on paper. Thank you, Henri." I hung up. I watched a pigeon peck at a crumb on the pavement. It was done. I was a millionaire who could not buy a sandwich with his debit card. And they were about to find out what happens when the well runs dry. My phone buzzed again. A text message this time. It was from Vanessa. "Hey Jerry, just a heads up. Daddy Tyrone is going to move into the house a few days early to help with wedding prep. He needs space to practice his speech. We decided the basement is best for him since it is quiet. You need to clear out your workshop by tonight. Move your tools to the shed or storage. He does not like the smell of sawdust." I stared at the message. The basement. My finished basement. The place where I kept my grandfather's hand plane. The place where I built Vanessa's dollhouse when she was 5. The place where I retreated when the world was too loud. My workshop was not just a room. It was my church. It was where I thought. Where I created. Where I was Jeremiah the craftsman, not Jeremiah the bank account. And she wanted me to clear it out for Tyrone. For the man who stole my money to buy a car. For the man who was sleeping with my wife. She wanted me to displace the tools of my trade, the tools that paid for her life, to make room for a thief. She called him Daddy Tyrone. And she called me Jerry. I typed a reply. My fingers were steady. Understood. I will take care of it immediately. I stood up. I walked to my truck. I drove home with a sense of purpose I had not felt in years. I was not going to argue. I was not going to fight. I was going to follow instructions. When I got home, the driveway was empty. They were out probably shopping with the credit cards that were about to stop working. I went straight to the basement. I did not move my tools to the shed. I moved them into my truck. My saws, my drills, my sanders. The antique workbench I had restored. I packed it all. Every screw, every nail, every scrap of wood. When the room was empty, I swept the floor. I left it spotless. A barren concrete box. Then I went upstairs to the kitchen. I opened the fridge and took out the bottle of champagne they had bought for their celebration. I poured it down the sink. I filled the empty bottle with tap water and put it back. I went to the thermostat and turned off the heat. It was November and the nights were getting cold. I sat in my empty workshop for a moment, sitting on a bucket. I looked around at the walls I had painted, the shelves I had built. I was leaving, but I was leaving a surprise. I took a piece of chalk and wrote on the concrete floor where my workbench used to be, "Rent is due on the 1st. Welcome home, Tyrone." I walked out to my truck. My phone pinged. A notification from the bank app. Transfer complete. Current balance $485. I laughed. It was a deep, rich sound that came from my belly. Let the wedding festivities begin. The bills were coming due, and I was the only one who had already paid. The sound of heavy boots on my hardwood floors was the first sign that the invasion had begun. Tyrone did not just walk into my house. He conquered it. He marched through the front door with 2 duffel bags and a sense of entitlement that was so thick you could choke on it. He dropped his bags right in the middle of the foyer, scratching the floorboards I had refinished with my own hands 5 years ago. I stood in the kitchen doorway watching him. I was wearing my work clothes, dust on my jeans, looking every bit the laborer they all believed I was. Tyrone was wearing a tracksuit that looked new, probably bought with the money Loretta had stolen from our retirement fund. He looked around the living room, nodding his head like a king surveying a new castle. "Nice place, Jerry," he said, not even looking at me. "A little dated, but it has good bones. I can work with this." Then he saw Buster. My 12-year-old golden retriever was sleeping on his favorite rug by the fireplace. Buster was deaf in one ear and had arthritis in his hips. He was the gentlest soul in this house, the only one who had greeted me with genuine love every day for over a decade. He lifted his head slowly, wagging his tail once a friendly greeting to a stranger. Tyrone walked over to him. I thought he was going to pet him. Instead, he shoved the dog with the side of his boot. Not a tap, a shove. "Get out of the way, mutt," he growled. "You are shedding on my carpet." Buster yelped, a sound of pain and confusion that tore through my chest. He struggled to his feet, his claws clicking on the wood as he scrambled away to the safety of the kitchen, hiding behind my legs. I took a step forward, my fists clenched at my sides. For a second, the red haze of rage clouded my vision. I wanted to break Tyrone's jaw. I wanted to throw him through the front window. I was a man who had moved steel beams and poured concrete foundations. I could snap him like a twig, but I stopped. I took a deep breath. Violence would get me arrested. Violence would give them exactly what they wanted, a reason to call the police, a reason to sign those competency papers, a reason to lock me away. I had to be smarter. I had to be colder. Tyrone laughed, seeing me freeze. "Whoa there, Jerry. Calm down. Just teaching the beast some manners. Speaking of manners, I am starving. Moving is hard work." He walked over to the kitchen island, the marble slab I had installed for Loretta's 40th birthday, and leaned against it. He looked me up and down with a sneer. "Austin and his parents are coming over in an hour for a meet and greet. They want to see the house. They want to meet the real father of the bride." He pointed a finger at his own chest. "That is me, in case you forgot. So since you are going to be hanging around anyway, why don't you make yourself useful? Whip me up some eggs, over easy. And bacon. Crispy." I stared at him. He was asking me to cook for him in my own kitchen. "Do not look at me like that, Jerry," he said, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "Consider it practice. When Austin S. folks get here, you are going to be serving drinks and clearing plates. You are the help, remember. That is what Vanessa told them. That is what Loretta agreed to. So you might as well get used to the uniform." I looked down at Buster, who was trembling against my leg. I looked at the kitchen I had built. I looked at the man who was trying to erase my existence. "Okay," I said. My voice was flat, devoid of emotion. Tyrone blinked, surprised by my submission. He expected a fight. He expected the angry old man. He did not know how to handle the quiet one. "Good," he said, relaxing. "Make enough for 3. Loretta is hungry too." I turned to the stove. I cracked the eggs. I fried the bacon. The smell of grease filled the air, usually a comforting scent, but today it smelled like surrender. But as I flipped the eggs, I smiled. A small, tight smile that nobody saw. Let him eat. Let him get comfortable. Let him think he has won. It makes the fall so much higher. An hour later, the doorbell rang. It was a sharp, demanding sound. I was in the kitchen washing the pan I had used to feed my enemy when Loretta rushed in. She was wearing pearls and a dress I recognized from the credit card bill I had paid last month. "Jerry," she hissed, "they are here. Stay in the kitchen until we need you. And for God's sake, take off that dirty hat. You look like a janitor." She did not wait for a response. She turned and ran to the door, putting on her best society wife smile. I took off my hat. I placed it on the counter. I smoothed my gray hair. I was not a janitor. I was the owner of this estate. I was the man who paid the mortgage. But today I would play the role they had cast me in. I walked to the swinging door that separated the kitchen from the living room and peeked through the crack. Austin was there looking slick in a navy suit. Beside him were his parents, the Worthingtons. I had heard about them for months but never met them. They looked exactly as I imagined. The father was tall, silver-haired, wearing a suit that cost more than my first car. The mother was thin, brittle-looking, draped in cashmere. Tyrone was standing in the center of the room holding a glass of scotch. My scotch. He was laughing loudly, playing the part of the jovial host. Loretta was clinging to his arm, looking at him with adoring eyes. "Oh, Tyrone, you have such a lovely home," Mrs. Worthington said, looking around at the crown molding I had installed. "It has so much character." "Thank you," Tyrone boomed. "It has been in the family for years. We have done a lot of work to modernize it." Lies. Pure, unadulterated lies spilling from his mouth like sewage. He claimed my labor. He claimed my history. And Loretta stood there and let him. She nodded in agreement, erasing 20 years of our life together with a single gesture. Jerry Austin shouted, snapping his fingers toward the kitchen. "We need some water in here. Sparkling. And ice." The disrespect was physical. It felt like a slap. But I pushed the door open. I grabbed the silver tray Loretta had set out. I placed the crystal glasses and the pitcher of water on it. I walked into the living room. The conversation stopped. Mr. Worthington looked at me. He did not see a host. He did not see an equal. He saw a black man in work clothes holding a tray. He assumed. "Ah, thank you," he said, taking a glass without making eye contact. "You must be the driver Austin mentioned. Good timing." I froze. I looked at Loretta. This was her chance. This was the moment she could say, "No, that is my husband. That is Jeremiah. He owns this house. He put food on our table for 2 decades. Loretta looked at me. Her eyes were cold, hard flint. She looked away. She took a sip of her drink and said nothing. That silence broke the last chain binding me to her. In that silence, the marriage ended, not on paper but in spirit. It turned to dust right there in the living room. "Yes, sir," I said, my voice steady. "Just the driver. I served the water. I moved around the room like a ghost. I offered a glass to Mrs. Worthington. She took it with a gloved hand, careful not to touch my fingers. I offered a glass to Tyrone. He smirked, taking it and deliberately letting his fingers brush mine, a gesture of dominance. "Good job, Jerry," he whispered. "Keep it coming." I walked back to the kitchen. My hands were not shaking. My heart was not racing. I felt a strange, icy calm. I had seen what I needed to see. I had given them every opportunity to show a shred of decency, and they had failed. I walked past the kitchen island and went into the small powder room off the hallway. I locked the door. I sat on the closed toilet lid. I pulled out my phone. It was time to pull the trigger. I dialed a number I had saved under the name The Shark. It was a man named Mr. Kowalski. He was not a traditional real estate agent. He was an investor, a man who bought distressed properties for cash, no questions asked, closing in 24 hours. He bought ugly houses, he bought problem houses, and he bought houses from people who needed to disappear. The phone rang twice. "This is Kowalski. Mr. Kowalski, this is Jeremiah Stone. We spoke last month about my property on Highland Avenue." "I remember," Kowalski said. His voice sounded like gravel in a mixer. "Prime lot. Good square footage. You said you were not ready to sell." "I am ready now," I said. "Good. I can have my guy there next week to run the numbers." "No," I said. "Not next week. Today. Right now. And I have conditions." I heard the shift in his tone. He smelled blood in the water. "What kind of conditions?" "I want a cash wire transfer by close of business today. I am willing to drop the price, 20% below market value." There was a pause. 20% was a lot of money. It was hundreds of thousands of dollars I was leaving on the table, but I did not care about the money. I cared about the timing. I am listening, Kowalski said. Condition number 1, I said. You buy it as is. No inspections, no walkthroughs. I send you the title, you send me the cash. Done. Condition number 2. Condition number 2 is the possession date. I need to stay in the house for a few days. I want the handover to be this Saturday, at 10 a.m. sharp. Saturday, Kowalski repeated. That is 4 days away. Why 10 a.m.? Because that is when the house will be empty. I lied. Or rather, that is when the people inside will be least expecting you. I want your demolition crew there at 10:01. I want the bulldozers on the lawn. I want the locks changed before noon. Kowalski chuckled. It was a dark, knowing sound. Sounds like you are planning a surprise party, Mr. Stone. Something like that, I said. The deed is in my name only. I bought it before I was married. There are no liens. It is clean. If the title search clears, I can wire the funds by 5 p.m., Kowalski said. But I am sending a crew to secure the perimeter Saturday morning. We do not want squatters. Send them, I said. Send the biggest, meanest crew you have, because you might have some resistance. I will handle the resistance, Kowalski said. Send me the paperwork. I hung up the phone. I sat there in the quiet of the bathroom for a moment. Outside I could hear the clinking of glasses and the sound of fake laughter. They were celebrating their bright future in my living room. They were toasting to the wedding, to the merger of families, to the money they thought was coming. They did not know that the ground beneath their feet had just been sold. They did not know that the roof over their heads now belonged to a stranger who viewed this house as nothing more than a tear down on a valuable lot. I stood up and looked in the mirror. The man looking back at me was tired. He had gray in his beard and wrinkles around his eyes. But his eyes were clear. The hesitation was gone. I flushed the toilet just for the sound effect and washed my hands. I unlocked the door and stepped back out into the hallway. Jerry Tyrone shouted from the living room, "We are out of ice." "Coming, sir," I called back. I walked to the freezer. I filled the bucket with ice. I walked back into the living room and placed it on the table. "Thank you, driver," Mr. Worthington said dismissively. "You are welcome," I said. "Enjoy the house. It is a very special place." I looked at Loretta one last time. She was beaming at Austin's mother, playing the part of the sophisticated matriarch. She did not look at me. I walked back to the garage. I opened my laptop and emailed the signed deed to Kowalski. Then I waited. 2 hours later, my phone buzzed. A notification from my offshore bank. Funds received. $1.2 million. It was done. The house was no longer mine. I was a guest in a stranger's property. And Tyrone, Loretta, and Vanessa were trespassing. They just did not know it yet. I leaned back in my chair and listened to the party upstairs. Laugh it up, I thought. Saturday is coming, and the checkout time is strict. The doorbell rang at 2 p.m. on Wednesday, shattering the silence of the house I no longer owned. I was in the kitchen polishing the silverware because Tyrone had complained that his fork had a water spot during breakfast. He had thrown it onto the table and told me to do my job properly. I had picked it up without a word. When I opened the front door, Austin was standing there, but he was not alone. Beside him stood a man in a charcoal suit carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than my first work truck. He had the sharp, predatory look of a man who billed by the minute and rounded up to the nearest hour. "Jerry, this is Mr. Sterling," Austin said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "He is the family attorney. We have some paperwork to clean up before the big day." They walked past me, the scent of expensive cologne trailing in their wake, masking the smell of the rot that had infested my family. Tyrone and Loretta emerged from the living room like vultures scenting a carcass. They took seats opposite me, forming a tribunal at the mahogany dining table I had built with my own hands 20 years ago. Sterling opened his briefcase, the latches clicking loudly in the quiet room. He slid a thick document across the table. It sat there between us, a stack of pressed wood pulp that carried the weight of a guillotine blade. "What is this?" I asked, keeping my voice trembling and low, hunching my shoulders to appear smaller. "It is a wedding sponsorship agreement," Mr. Stone Sterling said. His voice was smooth like oil on asphalt. "It simply formalizes your verbal commitment to fund the wedding expenses. It ensures that the vendors get paid no matter what happens." "No matter what happens," Austin clarified, leaning forward, his elbows resting on the table. "You are old, Jerry. Let us be honest. People your age have strokes. They have heart attacks. They fall downstairs. If you drop dead tomorrow, we cannot have the checks bouncing. My parents need guarantees. This binds your estate to the wedding budget. It is irrevocable. I looked at the document. I put on my reading glasses, my hands shaking visibly. I read the clauses. It was not just a sponsorship. It was a lien on my liquid assets. It gave them power of attorney over specific accounts to withdraw $80,000 immediately and another $50,000 for contingencies. Clause 4 stated that in the event of my incapacitation or death, these funds would be transferred directly to a holding account controlled by Austin and Vanessa. They were terrified I would die before they spent my money, or worse, that I would wake up and change my mind. They were trying to lock the vault door while they were still inside looting it. I looked up at Loretta. She was studying her fingernails, refusing to meet my eyes. She knew what this was. This was extortion. This was stripping a man of his agency in his own home. Is this necessary? Austin, I asked, letting a note of pathetic desperation creep into my voice. I promised I would pay. Do you not trust me? Trust is for poor people, Jerry Austin sneered. Business is for families like ours. My father asked me specifically if the funds were secured. I do not want to tell him I am relying on the word of a retired contractor. Sign the paper. Do not make this difficult. If you do not sign it, we might have to rethink your invitation to the reception. You might end up waiting in the car while we cut the cake. Loretta chimed in, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. Just sign it, honey. It is for Vanessa. Do you not want her to be happy? Do you want to ruin her big day because you are being stubborn? I looked down at the signature line. Jeremiah Lincoln Stone. That was my legal name. The name on my birth certificate. The name on the offshore accounts they did not know about. The name on the deed I had transferred to Kowalski yesterday. I picked up the pen. My hand shook violently. I let it shake. I wanted them to see a man breaking down. I wanted them to see a man terrified of losing the only connection he had left. I wanted them to see a victim so they would not look closely enough to see the executioner. I just do not want to be alone, I whispered, my voice cracking. You won't be alone, Jerry Tyrone said, grinning, showing his gold tooth. You have us. We are all one big happy family, right? Now sign the damn paper so we can start the party. I pressed the pen to the paper. The ink flowed black and permanent. But I did not write Jeremiah Lincoln Stone. I wrote Jeremiah Washington Stone, my father's middle name, a name I had never used on a legal document in my life. A name that would make this contract worth less than the paper it was printed on in any court of law. And even if they tried to enforce it, the account number listed in the appendix was the joint checking account, the one that currently held $485. I scribbled the signature, making it messy, illegible, a scrawl of a senile old man who could barely hold a pen. I added a flourish at the end that obscured the middle initial even further. To the naked eye, it looked official. To a forensic accountant or a judge, it was a clear indication of invalidity. There, I said, dropping the pen on the table. It is done. Sterling snatched the paper away, checking the signature line. He saw a mess of ink and assumed it was valid because he saw what he wanted to see. He saw a weak old man surrendering. He nodded to Austin, sliding the document into his briefcase. Excellent, Austin said, clapping his hands together. That wasn't so hard, was it, Jerry? Now my parents can relax. Tyrone stood up and walked over to the liquor cabinet. He pulled out a bottle of champagne. It was not one from my collection because I had emptied them all down the drain. This was a bottle Austin had brought. Tyrone popped the cork, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the quiet room. To Jerry, he boomed, pouring glasses for everyone except me. The man with the golden checkbook. The man who makes dreams come true even if he is just the help. Loretta laughed, raising her glass. Her laugh was light and airy, completely detached from the robbery she had just witnessed. To the wedding. It is going to be perfect. Tyrone walked over to me. I was still sitting in the chair, my hands resting on my knees. He clapped a heavy hand on my shoulder. He squeezed hard, digging his fingers into my trapezius muscle. It was a dominance move, a physical reminder of who was strong and who was weak. You did good, old man, he whispered in my ear, his breath smelling of stale tobacco and my stolen life. You did good. We are going to have a lot of fun with your money. Now go clean up the kitchen. We have celebrating to do, and you are bringing down the vibe. I stood up slowly, hunching my shoulders, playing the defeated servant. I did not look at Loretta. I did not look at Austin. I focused on the floorboards. I walked toward the kitchen, my steps heavy and slow. But before I pushed the swing door open, I turned back. They were clinking glasses, laughing, their faces flushed with victory. They were discussing the seating arrangements, the music, the honeymoon in the Maldives that I was supposedly paying for. They looked so happy. They looked so secure. They thought they had secured the bag. They thought they had drained me dry. I smiled. It was not the smile of a victim. It was the smile of a man who knows the bomb is already ticking under the table. "Enjoy it," I said softly. Austin looked up, his glass halfway to his mouth. "What was that, Jerry?" I said, "Enjoy the moment." I repeated, my voice steady and clear for the first time that day. "It goes by so fast. You never know when the music is going to stop." Austin frowned, confused by the shift in my tone. "Whatever, Jerry. Just bring us some appetizers." I walked into the kitchen and let the door swing shut. I leaned against the counter and took a deep breath. I checked my watch. The wire transfer to the offshore trust had cleared 4 hours ago. The house sale had been finalized 1 hour ago. The contract they held was invalid. The account it targeted was empty. And the house they were standing in belonged to a corporation that would be sending a demolition crew in 72 hours. I picked up a rag and started wiping the counter. I hummed a little tune. It was a funeral march, but they did not know it yet. They were drinking to their own demise. The crash was coming, and I had a front row seat. The kitchen was clean, the stage was set. The only thing left to do was wait for the curtain to fall. The master bedroom was dim lit only by the soft glow of the vanity mirror where Loretta was applying her night cream. The smell of lavender and expensive chemicals filled the air, masking the scent of betrayal that had permeated every corner of this house. I stood in the doorway watching her. She hummed a soft tune to herself, completely unbothered by the invasion of our home or the humiliation of her husband. She looked beautiful in the dim light, a testament to the life of leisure I had provided for her. But beauty without loyalty is just a painted facade on a condemned building. I walked into the room, my footsteps silent on the plush carpet. I needed to ask one last question. I needed to give her one final chance to redeem herself. Not because I thought she would take it, but because I needed to know that when I burned this bridge, I had left no stone unturned. "Loretta," I said, my voice low and steady. She did not turn around. She continued massaging the cream into her neck, staring at her reflection. "What is it, Jerry?" "I am tired. It has been a long day entertaining Austin's parents. They are exhausting people, but we have to make a good impression." I walked closer, standing just behind her chair, so our eyes met in the mirror. "Do you remember 1998, Loretta? Do you remember the night your brother Marcus called us from Atlantic City because he owed those loan sharks $40,000? Do you remember who drove 4 hours through a snowstorm with a bag of cash to save his kneecaps?" Loretta sighed, dropping her hands to her lap. She looked annoyed, not nostalgic. "Why are you bringing up ancient history, Jerry? Marcus has been clean for years." "I brought him home," I continued, ignoring her dismissal. "I paid for his rehab. I paid for his trade school. I did that because he was your family, because I thought we were a team." So what? She snapped, spinning the chair around to face me. "You want a medal. You want me to bow down and thank you every night for things you did 20 years ago. That is what husbands do, Jerry. They take care of things." I looked at her, searching for a flicker of the woman I thought I married. "I am not asking for a medal, Loretta. I am asking for respect. I am asking you why Tyrone is sleeping in my guest room, drinking my liquor and acting like the man of the house. I am asking you if you really want him here, if you really want to erase me from the picture after everything we built." Loretta stood up, her silk robe rustling. She walked past me to the bed, pulling back the duvet. She did not look at me when she spoke, and her voice was cold and pragmatic, like a blade cutting through ice. "Stop being so sensitive, Jerry. It is not about you. It is about Vanessa. Tyrone is her biological father. He has the look. He has the charm. Austin's family expects a certain pedigree. They expect a father who looks like he could have played ball or run a club, not a man who looks like he fixes their wiring." She sat on the edge of the bed, smoothing the sheets. "Tyrone needs to look good, so Vanessa looks good. If Vanessa looks good, she gets into the family, she gets the security, she gets the life I never had. You are just the provider, Jerry. That is your role. You write the checks and you stay in the background. Do not be selfish. Just accept it and let us get through this wedding. Don't be selfish. The words hung in the air, heavy and toxic. I had given them my life, my sweat, my fortune. And asking for a seat at the table was selfish. Asking not to be replaced by a convict was selfish. I looked at her one last time. She was already reaching for her sleeping mask, dismissing me entirely. She had made her choice. She had defined me. I was the provider. "Very well, Loretta," I said. "I will play my role." I turned and walked out of the bedroom, closing the door softly behind me. There was no anger left in me, only a profound, hollow silence. The man who had walked into that room hoping for a miracle was gone. In his place was Jeremiah Stone, the businessman, and the business was closing down. I went downstairs to the library. It was 3 a.m, and the house was silent save for the rhythmic snoring of Tyrone echoing from the basement guest suite. The house felt like a stranger to me now, a shell that I was merely occupying until the eviction notice was served. I did not turn on the lights. I knew every inch of this room in the dark. I moved to the bookshelf and pulled on the spine of a leather-bound copy of Moby Dick. The false back clicked open, revealing the small wall safe I had installed years ago. I spun the dial, my fingers nimble and sure. Inside lay the things that actually mattered to me, not the money. The money was already gone, safely sitting in the offshore trust. No, these were the things that held my soul. I took out the small velvet box containing my grandfather's pocket watch. It was brass-scratched and worth maybe $50 at a pawn shop, but it was the watch he had checked every day while working the assembly line. I slipped it into my pocket. Next, I took out the thick envelope containing the original photos of my mother, the ones from before she got sick, the ones where she was smiling, holding me as a baby in front of our tenement building. Loretta had never liked these photos. She said they looked poverty-stricken. She wanted to frame photos of us at galas, at resorts, photos that screamed new money. I slid the envelope into the inside pocket of my jacket. I moved to the desk. I opened the bottom drawer and removed the leather folio that contained my original sketches for this house. The blueprints I had drawn by hand, dreaming of the family that would fill these rooms. I ran my hand over the drafting paper, feeling the texture of the pencil lines. I had built this place with love. Now I was dismantling it with logic. I carried these few items out to the service entrance. I had parked my truck down the street earlier, knowing I would need to make a quiet exit. I walked through the damp grass, the night air cool against my face. I placed the items in the locked toolbox in the bed of my truck. They were safe now. They were the only things I was taking. I went back inside one last time. I walked through the living room. I looked at the expensive art on the walls, the sculptures on the pedestals. Loretta loved these things. She loved the status they conferred, but she did not own them. The corporation that now held the title to the house owned them, and in 48 hours the new owners would be here to claim their property. I felt a strange lightness. I was shedding a skin. I was leaving behind the heavy coat of expectation and ingratitude. I was stripping down to the essential truth of who I was. A man who could build anything and a man who could walk away from anything when the foundation was rotten. My phone buzzed in my pocket, shattering the silence. I pulled it out, frowning. It was 3:30 in the morning. The screen lit up with Vanessa's name. I answered, keeping my voice low. "Hello, Vanessa." "Where is the wine, Jerry?" Her voice was slurred, loud, and aggressive. She was shouting over the thumping bass of club music. "I told you I needed the 1996 Dom Perignon for the bachelorette party. The waiter just brought out a 2004. Do you know how embarrassing this is?" I held the phone away from my ear. She was drunk. She was entitled, and she was calling the man she had banned from her wedding to complain about the vintage of the champagne he was paying for. "I sent the list to your assistant," she screamed, "or I mean your secretary, whatever you call her. I specifically said the 96. It is the only one that pairs with the caviar we ordered. Fix it, Jerry. Call the club owner. Offer him double. I do not care. Just get the bottle here in 10 minutes. I listened to her rant. I listened to the sound of my money being burned in a nightclub I had never visited by people who despised me. "Vanessa," I said, cutting through her tirade. My voice was calm, almost cheerful. What she snapped. "Are you calling him?" "No," I said. "I am not calling him, and I am sorry about the wine. It must have been an oversight." "An oversight," she scoffed. "You are incompetent, Jerry. Even when you just have to pay for things, you mess it up. God, I cannot wait until this wedding is over so I do not have to deal with you." I smiled in the darkness of my empty living room. "You are right, Vanessa," I said. "You deserve better. You deserve the best. And do not worry about the wine. Forget the 1996. "What are you talking about?" she demanded. I mean, I have a much bigger surprise planned for the wedding day, I said. Something that will make everyone forget about the champagne, something unforgettable. It is going to be the talk of the town. There was a pause on the line. Her greed was piqued. Really? She asked, her voice softening slightly, losing some of its edge. What is it? Is it the yacht? Did you get the yacht for the honeymoon? I cannot tell you, I said. It would ruin the surprise. Just wait until Saturday morning. When you walk into that church, when you see what I have done, you will understand exactly how much I have invested in this day. She giggled a drunk, greedy sound. Okay, Jerry. Fine. I will drink this swill, but Saturday better be amazing. Do not let me down. I won't let you down, I promised. I will give you exactly what you deserve. I hung up the phone. I stood in the center of the dark room. I had given her a promise. And I was a man of my word. Saturday would be amazing. Saturday would be a day of reckoning. I walked out the front door, leaving it unlocked. There was nothing left inside worth stealing. I walked to my truck, started the engine, and drove away into the pre-dawn darkness. I was not going back to sleep. I had work to do. The demolition was scheduled, and I needed to make sure the wrecking ball was polished and ready to swing. The storm broke on Thursday morning, exactly 48 hours before the ceremony was scheduled to begin. The house was vibrating with a chaotic energy that usually precedes a disaster. I was in the kitchen chopping vegetables for a salad Tyrone had demanded for his lunch. He had told me earlier that he needed to keep his energy up for his speech rehearsal. I chopped the cucumbers with a rhythmic, steady cadence. Chop, chop, chop. It was the only sound in the room until the screaming started. Vanessa burst through the front door, her phone pressed to her ear, her face a mask of absolute panic. She was wearing a white silk tracksuit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment used to be. She looked at me with wild eyes and then screamed into the phone, "What do you mean declined? Try it again. It is a platinum card. It does not have a limit." She listened for a moment, her knuckles turning white as she gripped the device. Then she let out a shriek of frustration and threw her designer handbag onto the kitchen island, knocking over the bowl of cucumbers I had just prepared. "Jerry!" She screamed my name like it was a curse word. "What did you do?" "The florist is at the warehouse. She says the card was declined. The $15,000 for the arrangements. It did not go through. She is saying if she does not get payment in 10 minutes, she is selling the orchids to another wedding." I wiped my hands on a towel, keeping my face completely blank. I looked at her with the confused, innocent expression of an old man who has lost his reading glasses. "That is strange, Vanessa," I said, my voice slow and calm. "I called the bank yesterday. It must be a glitch. Tell her to run it again." She ran it 3 times. "Jerry," she yelled, "it is dead. The card is dead." Before I could answer, Austin stormed into the room. He looked disheveled, his usually perfect hair falling over his forehead. He was holding his phone too, and he looked like he wanted to punch a hole in the wall. "It is not just the florist," he shouted, glaring at me. "The bakery just called. The deposit for the 7-tier cake bounced, and the lighting crew says the check you wrote last week was returned for insufficient funds." "What the hell is going on, Jerry? You told us this was handled." I leaned against the counter, putting on the performance of a lifetime. I let my mouth drop open. I let my hands tremble slightly. I looked from Vanessa to Austin, feigning shock and confusion. "Insufficient funds," I stammered. "That is impossible. I have excellent credit. I transferred the money. There must be a mistake with the bank system. You know how these computers are. Sometimes they flag large transactions as fraud." "Fraud?" Austin laughed, a bitter bark of a sound. "The only fraud here is you. My parents are upstairs resting. If they find out the wedding is falling apart because you cannot manage a simple checking account, they are going to leave. Fix this, Jerry. Fix it right now, or so help me God." He did not finish the threat, but the vein throbbing in his neck said enough. They were terrified. They were standing on the edge of a cliff, and I was the one holding the rope. They just did not realize I had already cut it. Okay, calm down," I said, raising my hands in a placating gesture. "Let me call the bank. I have a direct line to the priority desk. I will get this sorted out." I pulled out my phone. I did not dial the bank. I dialed the number for the local weather service, which had an automated recording. I put the phone to my ear and waited for the voice to start speaking. "Hello," I shouted into the phone, making sure my voice carried through the whole house. "This is Jeremiah Stone, account ending in 4598. I have my daughter here, and she is telling me her transactions are being declined." "What is going on?" I paused, nodding my head as if listening to an explanation. The automated voice was telling me there was a 30% chance of rain on Saturday. It was fitting. A storm was definitely coming. "Security hold," I yelled, acting outraged. "What do you mean, security hold? I authorized those charges." "Yes, I know they are large amounts. It is a wedding, for crying out loud." "No, do not tell me about protocol. I have been a customer for 40 years. Vanessa was pacing back and forth, biting her nails. Austin was leaning over the counter, trying to hear the other end of the conversation. I turned away, covering the microphone with my hand. "They are saying it is a standard freeze because of the unusual activity," I whispered to them. "They think someone stole my identity because of all the high-value charges in different places." "Tell them to unfreeze it," Vanessa hissed. "Tell them it is me." I went back to shouting at the weather report. "Look, I need you to override this immediately. My daughter's wedding is in 2 days. Yes, I have the security code. It is my mother's maiden name. Washington." I waited a few seconds, tapping my foot impatiently. "What do you mean 24 hours, I bellowed. "That is unacceptable. We need the money now. The vendors are waiting. Is there no way to expedite it?" I listened to the silence on the line. Then I sighed a long, heavy sound of defeat. Fine. If that is the only way, give me the confirmation code." I grabbed a notepad and a pen from the counter. I wrote down a series of numbers: 7, 4, 9, 2, 1, 6. It was not a confirmation code. It was the winning numbers from a lottery ticket I had bought 10 years ago. A ticket that had won me $10. It was a number that meant nothing, but to them it looked like salvation. I hung up the phone and turned to them, wiping fake sweat from my brow. "Okay, listen to me," I said, my voice authoritative. "They have lifted the security freeze, but the system needs to reset. It takes exactly 24 hours for the funds to clear into the vendor accounts. It is a federal banking regulation," they said. "They cannot bypass it." 24 hours, Vanessa screamed. "That is tomorrow afternoon. The rehearsal dinner is tomorrow night. The vendors need money today." I held up the piece of paper with the lottery numbers. "This is the priority wire confirmation code," I lied, holding it out like a golden ticket. "Call the florist. Call the bakery. Give them this number. Tell them the bank has authorized a direct federal wire transfer that will hit their accounts by noon tomorrow, guaranteed. Tell them I, Jeremiah Stone, personally accept full liability. If the money is not there by tomorrow, I will pay them double in cash." Vanessa snatched the paper from my hand. "Will they believe that?" she asked, her eyes wide and desperate. "They have to," I said. "I am a respected businessman in this town. My name means something. Tell them to call the bank manager if they doubt it. The manager will confirm the transfer is in the system." Of course, the manager would do no such thing because the transfer did not exist. But the vendors wanted the business. They wanted the sale. If Vanessa sounded confident, if she gave them a specific code, they might just hold off on canceling the orders for one more day. They would hold on just long enough to set up the wedding, just long enough for the humiliation to be maximized. Austin looked at the paper, then at me. His eyes were narrowed. "You better be right about this, Jerry. If we get to the church and there are no flowers, I am going to make you regret the day you met my mother-in-law." I looked him dead in the eye. "Austin, I promise you by this time on Saturday, everyone will have exactly what they deserve. The money will be where it needs to be." He huffed, snatching the paper from Vanessa. "I will call them myself. I know how to talk to these people. You would probably just mess it up again." He walked out of the kitchen, pulling out his phone, already dialing. I could hear him in the hallway, putting on his best rich boy voice, bullying the florist with my fake numbers. Vanessa looked at me one last time. She did not say thank you. She did not say sorry for yelling. She just smoothed her hair and looked at the mess on the floor. "Clean that up," she said, pointing to the cucumbers she had knocked over. "Daddy Tyrone needs his lunch. And try not to make any more mistakes, Jerry. My nerves cannot take it." She spun on her heel and left. I knelt down on the floor and began to pick up the cucumber slices. I was not humiliated. I was energized. I had bought them time. I had bought them just enough rope to hang themselves. 24 hours. That would push the crisis to Friday afternoon. By then it would be too late to cancel the guests. By then the family would be gathered. By then the train would be moving too fast to stop. I threw the vegetables in the trash. I washed my hands. I walked to the living room doorway and listened. Austin and Vanessa were in the sunroom. They thought I was out of earshot. "God, he is useless," Austin was saying. His voice was low, filled with venom. "A security freeze. Who lets that happen? He is losing it, Vanessa. His brain is turning to mush." "I know," Vanessa replied. "It is embarrassing. Did you see him shaking? He looked like a scared puppy. I hate that I have to rely on him. Don't worry, babe, Austin said soothingly. It is almost over. Once we get through the wedding, we execute the plan. We put him in the home, we get power of attorney, and we never have to deal with his incompetence again. We will sell this place, buy something modern in the city, and forget he ever existed. Yeah, Vanessa sighed. He is just a means to an end. Just a wallet with a pulse, and a weak pulse at that. I honestly do not know how my mom stayed with him this long. He is so boring, so small. Small. That is what they thought. They thought I was small because I was quiet. They thought I was weak because I was kind. I walked away from the door. I went back to the kitchen and started making Tyrone's lunch. I made it perfectly. I toasted the bread just right. I sliced the tomatoes thin. I placed it on a tray and carried it down to the basement where Tyrone was practicing his speech in the mirror. "Here's your lunch, Tyrone," I said, setting it on the table. He looked at it, then at me. "About time, old man. Did you get the money sorted?" "Yes," I said. "It is all sorted." "Good," he grunted, taking a bite of the sandwich. "Now get out of here. I need to focus. I have to sound like a father on Saturday." I walked up the stairs out of the basement. I walked past the sunroom where the happy couple was planning my demise. I walked out the back door into the garden I had planted. I sat on the stone bench by the fountain. I watched the water flow. They called me useless. They called me small. Saturday was coming. And on Saturday, I would be the biggest thing in their lives. I would be the storm that washed them all away. The clock was ticking, and every second brought them closer to the edge of the cliff I had built just for them. The rehearsal dinner was held in the crystal ballroom of the Majestic Hotel, a venue that dripped with the kind of ostentatious wealth Austin S. family adored. Chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the ceiling, casting prisms of light onto the polished marble floors. I arrived 10 minutes late because I had been busy finalizing the logistics of my own private event scheduled for later that night. When I walked in, no one greeted me. No one waved. I scanned the room looking for my place card. I found it not at the head table with the family, but at a small round table near the kitchen doors, squeezed in next to the sound technician and the wedding planner's assistant. I sat down, smoothing the napkin over my knees. The sound guy, a young man with a ponytail and a headset, gave me a sympathetic nod. "Tough break, man," he whispered. "Usually the dad sits up front. I am just the driver," I said quietly, taking a sip of the tap water that had been placed in front of me. At the head table, Tyrone sat in the center, flanked by Vanessa and Loretta. He was wearing a tuxedo that I knew for a fact was rented on my credit card before I froze it. He looked the part, I had to admit. Tall, broad-shouldered, exuding a dangerous charisma that people mistook for strength. Austin sat on the other side with his parents, who were looking at Tyrone with a mixture of fascination and condescension, like he was an exotic animal they had bought for the zoo. The speeches began. Austin, as father, spoke first, droning on about mergers and acquisitions and how marriage was the ultimate partnership. Then it was Tyrone's turn. He stood up, holding a glass of champagne high. The room fell silent. 26 years ago, he began, his voice deep and smooth, echoing through the speakers. He was born with a gift for storytelling. "I held a baby girl in my arms, and I made a promise. I promised I would do whatever it took to give her the world. Life threw us some curveballs. I had to go away for a while to handle some business. But even when I was gone, my heart was right here. I watched Vanessa. She was dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief. She was buying it. Everyone was buying it. The man who had abandoned her, who had chosen a life of crime over fatherhood, was rewriting history in real time, and he was doing it with my money. He continued pacing the floor like a preacher. It was hard being away, missing the first steps, the first words. But I knew she was safe because her mother is a queen. He gestured to Loretta, who beamed like a teenager. And now, seeing her grown, seeing the woman she has become, I know my sacrifice was worth it. I raised a survivor. I raised a diamond. He raised a diamond. He had not raised a finger. I had raised her. I had sat up with her when she had the flu. I had taught her how to solve quadratic equations. I had paid for the braces that gave her that perfect smile. I had been the one there, in the rain, in the snow, in the middle of the night. But in this room, in this narrative, I did not exist. I was a ghost, haunting my own life. "To Vanessa," he shouted, raising his glass. "To my daughter, the best thing I ever made." The room erupted in applause. Cheers, whistles, the clinking of glasses. Austin pounded the table. Loretta looked at Tyrone with pure, unadulterated adoration. I felt a cold numbness spread through my limbs. It was not anger anymore. It was clarity. Absolute crystalline clarity. I was watching the final scene of a play I never wanted to be in. Then came the moment that shattered the last fragment of my restraint. The moment that turned the tragedy into a farce. Tyrone leaned down and whispered something to Loretta. She giggled, blushing. Then in front of God and everyone, in front of Austin S. parents, in front of her daughter, she grabbed Tyrone S. lapels and pulled him down for a kiss. It was not a friendly peck. It was a passionate, lingering kiss. A kiss that claimed him. A kiss that erased me. The room went wild. Whoops and hollers filled the air. Austin's father looked a bit scandalized, but his mother was clapping politely, probably thinking this was some quaint custom of our people. I sat there frozen, my wife kissing another man, at her daughter S. rehearsal dinner, while I paid for the steak they were eating. The sound guy next to me cleared his throat awkwardly. Is that your wife, man?" I looked at him. I looked at the table where they were laughing, celebrating their victory. "Not anymore," I said. I stood up. No one noticed. All eyes were on the happy family at the head table. I walked to the kitchen doors. I pushed them open and stepped into the bustling hallway filled with waiters carrying trays of filet mignon. I walked past them, past the smell of expensive food, past the sound of laughter. I walked out the back exit into the alley where the dumpsters were kept. The night air was cool and smelled of garbage and rain. It was the most honest smell I had encountered all night. I pulled out my phone. I dialed a number I had saved for this specific moment. "Mr. Stone," a voice answered immediately. "We are on standby. I am leaving the hotel now," I said. My voice was calm, devoid of the tremors that had plagued me earlier. "The house is empty. They are all here, and the after-party is scheduled to go until 2 a.m. You have a 4-hour window. We can do it in 3, the voice said. "We have the truck and a crew of 12. We specialize in rapid liquidation." "I want everything gone," I said. "I want the furniture, the rugs, the curtains, the dishes in the cupboards, the clothes in the closets. I want you to strip the beds. I want you to take the light bulbs if you can. What about the personal items, photos, documents? Box them up and put them in the storage unit we discussed, but leave the rest. Leave the walls, leave the floor, and leave the kitchen island. Just the island. Just the island. I have something to put on it. Understood. We are moving out now. We will be done by 6 a.m. I hung up. I walked to my truck parked down the block away from the valets and the luxury cars. I got in and started the engine. I did not drive home. I drove to a 24-hour diner on the edge of town. I ordered coffee and a slice of pie. I sat there watching the clock on the wall. Tick-tock. Tick-tock. Every second that passed was a chair being carried out of my house. Every minute was a drawer being emptied. Every hour was a room being stripped of the lies that had filled it. I imagined them coming home. I imagined the confusion, the panic, the realization that the stage they had performed on had been dismantled while they were taking their bows. I drank my coffee. It was bitter and hot. It tasted like freedom. At 3 a.m. my phone buzzed. It was a text from the crew lead. "Halfway done. This place had a lot of stuff." "Nice stuff. You sure about this?" I typed back. "Take it all. It is tainted." I sat there until the sun began to paint the sky with streaks of purple and orange. The dawn of the wedding day. The day Vanessa had dreamed of. The day Loretta had schemed for. The day Tyrone thought he would be crowned king. At 6 a.m. I got the final text. "Job done. House is a shell. Keys are under the mat. Invoice sent." I paid the invoice from my phone using the funds in the offshore account. It was a lot of money, but it was cheaper than therapy. I stood up, leaving a $20 tip for the waitress who had let me sit there all night without asking questions. I walked out to my truck. I had one stop to make before I disappeared. I had to go back to the house one last time, to leave the gift, to leave the bill. I drove through the quiet streets. The neighborhood was sleeping. The lawns were manicured, the houses silent. I pulled into my driveway. It looked the same from the outside. The brick facade, the white pillars. It looked like a home. But when I unlocked the front door and stepped inside, the echo of my footsteps told a different story. It was empty. Completely, utterly empty. The hardwood floors gleamed in the morning light, stretching out into open space. No sofas, no tables, no rugs to muffle the sound. I walked through the rooms. The living room where Tyrone had sat in my chair. Empty. The dining room where I had been forced to sign the contract. Empty. The kitchen where I had cooked their meals. Empty except for the marble island standing like a monolith in the center of the room. I walked upstairs. The master bedroom. Empty. The closet where Loretta kept her designer clothes. Bare, not a hanger left. It was beautiful. It was clean. It was a blank slate. I went back down to the kitchen. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the thick manila envelope I had prepared. It was heavy. It contained the deed transfer. It contained the divorce papers I had printed out at the hotel business center. It contained the photos from the private investigator showing Loretta and Tyrone entering a motel room 3 months ago. And it contained the bill, an itemized list of every dollar I had spent on them for 22 years. From Vanessa S.'s first pair of shoes to the deposit for the wedding venue, $485,000. I placed the envelope in the center of the marble island. It was the only thing in the house. It demanded attention. I took out a red marker. I wrote on the front of the envelope in big block letters, "Paid in full." Then underneath in smaller letters, "Welcome to your new life. It comes unfurnished." I capped the marker. I looked around one last time. I did not feel sad. I felt light. I felt like a man who had finally put down a heavy load he had been carrying for miles. I walked out the front door, leaving it unlocked. I got into my truck. I did not look back. I drove toward the airport. I had a plane to catch. And they had a reality to face. The wedding was in 4 hours. The storm was about to hit. And I was already gone. The morning sun hit the penthouse suite of the Ritz-Carlton, but it brought no warmth to the 2 women pacing the floor in silk robes. It was 9 in the morning. The ceremony was scheduled for 11. The hair and makeup teams had already packed up and left, taking their sizable tips with them, tips that had been charged to a credit card that was currently declining across the city. Vanessa stood by the window looking down at the street. She looked like a princess in her $12,000 Vera Wang gown, a dress she had demanded I pay for because it was her special day. But the princess was sweating. Her perfect makeup was already in danger of running because the vintage Rolls-Royce that was supposed to pick them up was nowhere to be seen. "Mom, call him again." Vanessa snapped, her voice tight with panic. "He is the driver. That is literally his only job today. How can he be late?" Loretta sat on the edge of the velvet sofa clutching her phone. She had dialed my number 20 times in the last 15 minutes. Each time she heard the same automated message. "The subscriber you are calling is not available." She did not know that the phone she was calling was currently sitting in a trash can at the airport terminal, smashed into pieces. She did not know that the subscriber was currently 30,000 feet over the Atlantic, sipping a glass of champagne that actually belonged to him. "He is not picking up," Loretta said, her voice trembling. "This is not like him. Jerry is annoying, but he is punctual. He knows how important this is." "Maybe he got lost," Vanessa said, pacing faster. "Or maybe the car broke down. God, he drives that stupid truck everywhere. Maybe he forgot how to drive a real car." She looked at her phone. She had texts from Austin. "Where are you? We need to start photos." "Text him back," Loretta said. "Tell him we are running a little late. Tell him Jerry is having traffic issues. Do not panic him." But the panic was already setting in. It was a cold, creeping sensation that started at the base of their spines. The silence from my end was not just an inconvenience. It was a void. It was the first crack in the foundation of their perfect day. They were stuck in a hotel room 20 minutes from the church with no ride, no money to pay for a ride, and a sinking feeling that the man they had treated like a servant had finally quit. Meanwhile, across town at the Crystal Cathedral, the storm I had forecasted was making landfall. Austin stood in the vestibule, adjusting his silk tie, checking his reflection in the glass doors. He felt powerful. He felt rich. He was about to marry a beautiful woman and inherit a lifestyle he had not earned. His parents were already seated in the front pew, looking bored and expensive. Tyrone was in the vestry, drinking communion wine and practicing his father of the bride walk. Then the doors opened. It was not the bride. It was Mr. Sterling, the venue manager. He did not look happy. He looked like a man who had just realized he was holding a bouncing check. He walked straight up to Austin, ignoring the guests, ignoring the sanctity of the church. "Mr. Stone Sterling," said, his voice low but carrying like a hammer strike in the quiet hall. "We have a problem." Austin smiled, that condescending smile he saved for service workers. Not now, Sterling. We are about to start. Whatever it is, talk to Jerry. He handles the bills. I tried to talk to Jerry. Sterling said, his face turning red. His phone is disconnected, and more importantly, the priority wire transfer he promised did not arrive. Austin laughed nervously. That is ridiculous. He gave us the confirmation code. I saw the paper myself. 749216. Sterling held up a tablet. That is not a wire confirmation code, Mr. Stone. That is a sequence of numbers that corresponds to a lottery ticket sold in 2012. I ran it through the banking system. It does not exist. The account he claimed to be sending it from has been flagged as closed. The smile slid off Austin's face like grease. Closed. What do you mean closed? I mean, there is no money, Sterling said, his voice rising. Zero. And per our contract, if the full balance of $100,000, including the rush fees and the catering overages, is not settled before the ceremony begins, we shut it down. Shut it down, Austin stammered. You cannot shut it down. My parents are in there. There are 200 guests. The flowers are already up. Those flowers belong to me, Sterling said, and my crew is standing by to take them down. You have 10 minutes. $100,000, hard funds, credit card or wire, or everyone goes home. Austin stood there paralyzed. The world was tilting on its axis. The golden goose had not just stopped laying eggs, it had flown the coop. He pulled out his phone. He dialed my number. His fingers were shaking so hard he mistyped it twice. When he finally got through and heard the operator message, he almost threw the phone through the stained glass window. He is not answering, Austin screamed, his voice cracking. The useless old fool is not answering. You have 9 minutes, Sterling said, checking his watch. Austin ran into the sanctuary. He ran past his friends, past the business associates, past the people he had bragged to about his rich father-in-law. He ran to the front pew where his parents sat. Mom. Dad. He whispered, his face pale and sweaty. I need a favor. A big favor. Mrs. Worthington looked at her son with a mixture of confusion and distaste. Austin, you are sweating. It is unbecoming. What is the matter? There is a glitch with the bank. Austin lied, his voice hysterical. Jerry's transfer got stuck. The venue needs a hold, just a temporary hold on a credit card, until Monday. How much? Mr. Worthington asked, his eyes narrowing. 100, Austin squeaked. 100,000. Mr. Worthington stood up. The movement was slow, deliberate, and terrifying. He looked at his son. He looked at the empty altar where the groom should be standing. He looked at the venue manager who was watching them from the doorway with his arms crossed. You want me to put $100,000 on my card because your wife's family cannot pay their bills? He asked, his voice loud enough for the first 3 rows to hear. It is just a hold, Dad, Austin pleaded. Jerry has the money. He is just having technical difficulties. Jerry is a phantom, Mr. Worthington said. I knew this was a mistake. I knew that girl was trouble. She comes from nothing, Austin. And clearly she brings nothing to the table except debt and chaos. Dad, please, Austin begged, tears forming in his eyes. If we do not pay, they are going to cancel the wedding right now. Everyone will know. It will be a humiliation. It is already a humiliation, Mr. Worthington snapped. But I will not have our family name dragged through the mud because of a bounced check. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his wallet. He extracted a black titanium card. He held it out, but when Austin reached for it, he pulled it back. This is not a gift, he hissed. This is a loan, a high-interest loan. You will pay back every cent, Austin. And I do not want to hear any excuses about investments or waiting for the market. You will get a job, a real job. And you will pay me. Austin nodded frantically. Yes, Dad. Of course. Thank you. And one more thing, his mother added, her voice like a razor. This marriage is starting in the red. Do not expect us to cover the honeymoon, or the house, or the baby nurse. The faucet is off, Austin. You wanted to play grown-up with these people. Now you pay the price. Austin took the card. He felt the weight of it. It was heavy. It felt like a shackle. He ran back to Sterling and handed it over. Run it, he said, his voice hollow. Sterling took the card. He swiped it on his mobile terminal. He waited. The machine beeped. Approved. We are good to go, Sterling said, handing the card back. But tell your father-in-law next time he tries to pass off lottery numbers as banking codes, I will call the police. Austin stood alone in the vestibule. The crisis was averted, but the damage was done. He had saved the wedding, but he had lost his freedom. He was now owned by his father, and he knew with a sickening certainty that the money from Jerry was never coming. Back at the hotel, Vanessa and Loretta were forced to face their own reality. After 45 minutes of waiting, the hotel concierge politely informed them that their checkout time had passed and the card on file for the incidentals had been declined. "We need a taxi," Vanessa screamed, throwing her bouquet against the wall. "We have to get to the church." They ended up in a yellow cab. Vanessa, in her $12,000 dress, squeezed into the back seat of a Toyota Camry that smelled of stale pine air freshener. Loretta sat next to her, holding the veil so it would not drag on the dirty floor mats. The driver, a man who did not care about weddings or dresses, drove fast, hitting every pothole in the city. Vanessa bounced around in the back, tears of rage streaming down her face, ruining the makeup she could not afford to have retouched. "This is Jerry's fault," she sobbed. "He did this on purpose. He is incompetent. He is ruining my day." Loretta did not say anything. She was looking out the window, watching the city blur by. A knot of dread was tightening in her stomach. Jerry was never late. Jerry never missed a payment. Jerry was the rock she had built her life on, and the rock was gone. She touched her neck where a diamond necklace should have been, but she had sold it last week to pay for Tyrone's suit. When the taxi pulled up to the church 40 minutes late, the guests were restless. Austin was sweating at the altar, Tyrone was drunk in the vestry, and I was 4,000 miles away watching the sun set over the ocean, feeling the first true moment of peace I had known in 20 years. The wedding would happen. The vows would be spoken. But they would be spoken in the shadow of a debt that would crush them. And when they went home to celebrate, to drink my wine and sleep in my beds, they would find that the nightmare was just beginning. Because the house was not just a building, it was a weapon. And the safety was off. The reception was not a party. It was a hostage negotiation disguised as a dinner. The food was cold, the music was low, and the tension was so thick you could carve it with a dull knife. Austin had spent the entire 4 hours at the open bar drinking scotch like it was water, trying to numb the reality of the 6-figure debt he had just strapped to his father's credit card. His parents, the illustrious Worthingtons, sat at the head table with stone faces, refusing to make eye contact with anyone, especially Loretta and Tyrone. They ate their salmon in silence, plotting their exit strategy and likely their son's annulment. When the DJ finally announced the last dance, a mercifully short rendition of a song nobody liked, the relief in the room was palpable. The guests fled like rats from a sinking ship, leaving behind half-eaten cake and a family on the brink of implosion. "We are going to the house," Austin slurred, stumbling toward the exit. His arm draped heavily over Vanessa's shoulders. "We are going to find Jerry, and he is going to explain where my money is, or I am going to burn that house down with him inside." Vanessa was sobbing. Her makeup ruined her dress, stained with wine she had spilled on herself an hour ago. "My dad will handle him," she hiccuped, looking at Tyrone. "Won't you, Daddy? You will make him pay." Tyrone, emboldened by the free liquor and the misplaced confidence of a man who thinks he has won, cracked his knuckles. "Oh, I will handle him, baby girl. Jerry thinks he can ghost us. He thinks he can hide. But he forgets who I am. I do not call the police. I settle things myself." They piled into the cars. Austin's parents insisted on coming, mostly because they wanted to ensure their investment was protected, or perhaps to witness the murder they hoped would happen. The convoy of luxury vehicles tore through the quiet suburban streets, engines revving, headlights cutting through the darkness. They were a lynch mob in tuxedos and gowns fueled by entitlement and rage. They pulled into the driveway of my house at midnight. The house was dark. Not a single light was on. It loomed against the night sky, a silent monolith. To them, it looked like a fortress refusing to surrender. To me, from my vantage point, thousands of miles away, it was just a hollow shell. Loretta was the first one out of the car. She marched up the front walk, her heels clicking angrily on the pavement. She was furious. She had been humiliated in front of society, in front of her new in-laws, and she blamed me entirely. She did not blame her greed. She did not blame her infidelity. She blamed the man who had stopped writing the checks. She jammed her key into the front door lock. She twisted it. It did not move. She frowned, jiggling it, pulling the handle. Nothing. He changed the locks. She shrieked, stepping back and looking up at the dark windows. That petty, miserable old man changed the locks. "Jerry, open this door. Open it right now, or I swear to God I will call the sheriff." There was no answer. Just the wind rustling the oak trees I had planted 20 years ago. Austin stumbled up the steps, pushing Loretta aside. "Move, let me do it. I will kick it down." He slammed his shoulder against the solid mahogany door. He bounced off with a groan of pain, clutching his arm. The door did not budge. I had installed that door myself. It was reinforced steel core. It was meant to keep bad people out, and it was doing its job perfectly. "Out of the way," Tyrone growled. He walked to the flower bed, picked up a decorative river rock the size of a cantaloupe, and walked to the large bay window of the living room. He did not hesitate. He did not think about the alarm system, which I had deactivated before I left because I wanted them to get inside. I wanted them to see. He hurled the rock. The glass shattered with a deafening crash, shards raining down onto the porch and the hardwood floor inside. "That is how you enter a house," Tyrone boasted, brushing glass off the sill. He climbed through the broken window, his tuxedo tearing on a jagged edge. He landed inside with a thud. He reached up and unlocked the front door from the inside, throwing it open with a dramatic flourish. "Welcome home, family," he shouted into the darkness. They poured into the hallway. Austin, Vanessa, Loretta, and the Worthingtons, all flipping switches, expecting to flood the room with light and find me cowering in my recliner. The lights flickered on, and the collective gasp that followed sucked the air out of the room. It was gone, all of it. The living room was a cavern. The Italian leather sofas were gone. The Persian rugs were gone. The 70-inch television was gone. The paintings on the walls were gone, leaving only pale rectangles on the paint where the sun had not faded the color. The silence was absolute. The only sound was the crunch of broken glass under their shoes as they walked further into the void. Their footsteps echoed loudly, bouncing off the bare walls and the hardwood floor that gleamed cold and empty under the recessed lighting. "Where's the furniture?" Vanessa whispered, her voice trembling. "Where is everything?" They moved like zombies, drifting from room to room, hoping to find a pocket of normalcy, a room that had been spared. They found nothing. The dining room was empty. The crystal chandelier hung above a non-existent table. The china cabinet which held Loretta's collection of porcelain figurines was gone. They ran upstairs. I could hear their frantic footsteps thumping on the bare treads. My room. Vanessa screamed from the top of the stairs. My clothes, my shoes. She ran into her old bedroom. It was stripped. The bed, the dresser, the closet full of designer clothes I had bought her over the years. Gone. Not a single shoe was left, just wire hangers clattering on the metal rod. Loretta ran to the master bedroom. She threw open the door. The king-sized bed, the silk drapes, her jewelry box. Gone. The walk-in closet was a gaping maw of emptiness. They came back downstairs, their faces pale, their eyes wide with a fear that was slowly replacing their anger. This was not just a lock change. This was an erasure. "He robbed us," Austin shouted, spinning in circles in the empty living room. "He stole everything. Call the police. This is theft." Mr. Worthington looked around, his nose wrinkling in distaste. "It appears, Austin, that he took his own property." "Did you not say he paid for everything?" "He took my things, too." Loretta cried, clutching her chest. "My clothes. My jewelry." "Technically," Tyrone muttered, looking uncomfortable for the first time. "If he bought it, and you do not have receipts." "Shut up," Loretta snapped at him. "Just shut up. Find him. He has to be here. He has to be in the basement. That is where he keeps his tools." They rushed to the basement door. They thundered down the stairs, but the basement was just as empty. The workshop was swept clean. The guest suite where Tyrone had been sleeping was bare. The mattress was gone. The sheets were gone. Even the mini fridge was gone. The only thing left was the chalk message I had scrawled on the floor. "Rent is due on the 1st." Tyrone stared at it, his jaw tightening. He kicked the wall, leaving a black scuff mark on the paint. They trudged back upstairs, defeated, confused, and terrified. They gathered in the kitchen because it was the only room that felt somewhat familiar, even though the stools were gone and the appliances were silent. The kitchen island stood in the center of the room, a massive slab of Carrara marble. It was the only horizontal surface left in the entire house. And sitting right in the center of it, illuminated by the single pendant light I had left on, was a thick manila envelope. It looked like a tombstone in a graveyard. "What is that?" Austin asked, pointing a shaking finger at it. "It looks like a letter," Vanessa said, her voice barely a whisper. Loretta walked toward it slowly, as if she expected it to explode. In a way it would. She reached out and touched the red marker writing on the front, "Paid in full." She picked it up. It was heavy, thick. She turned it over and broke the seal. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped it. She pulled out the contents, a stack of papers clipped together. Photos, legal documents. "What is it?" Mom Vanessa asked, crowding in next to her. Loretta did not answer. She was staring at the first page, her face draining of all color until she looked like a wax statue. She dropped the page on the marble counter, then the next, then the next. Austin picked up the first sheet. He read it out loud, his voice cracking. Agreement of sale and transfer of property. Seller, Jeremiah Lincoln Stone. Buyer, Kowalski Holdings, LLC. Date of transfer yesterday. He looked up, his eyes bulging. He sold the house. He sold the house yesterday. What? Vanessa screamed. He cannot sell the house. It is our house. It says here he is the sole owner. Austin read on. Closing was immediate. Cash deal. Vacancy required by 10 a.m. Sunday. Sunday, Tyrone said, checking his watch. That is tomorrow. Austin picked up the next document. It was a restraining order application filled out but not yet filed, detailing Tyrone's criminal record and threats of violence. Next to it was a printout of Tyrone's outstanding warrants in 2 other states. Loretta, Tyrone said, backing away slightly. I think I hear sirens. There were no sirens. It was just the sound of his own cowardice ringing in his ears. Loretta was holding the third stack of papers. It was the bill. The itemized list of every dollar I had spent. The tuition, the cars, the bail money, the medical bills, the vacations. The total was circled in red at the bottom, $485,000, and written underneath in my handwriting. Consider this my wedding gift. I have deducted it from your inheritance, because there is no inheritance left. Loretta let out a sound that was half scream, half sob. She slid down to the floor, her expensive dress puddling around her on the cold tile. He left us nothing, she wailed. Nothing. Mr. Worthington stepped forward. He picked up the deed transfer. He looked at it with a professional eye. He nodded slowly. It is ironclad, he said coldly. He sold the asset. He liquidated the contents. And by the looks of this bill, he has a strong case for claiming he owed you nothing. He looked at Austin with pure disgust. You married into a family of grifters, Austin, and you let them grift me for $100,000 today. Dad, Austin pleaded. I did not know. You are an idiot, his father said. Come, Martha, we are leaving. I need to call our lawyers to see if we can annul this farce before the ink dries on the certificate. They turned and walked out, stepping over the broken glass in the hallway. They did not look back. Austin stood there watching his safety net walk out the door. He looked at Vanessa, who was crying on the floor next to her mother. He looked at Tyrone, who was eyeing the back door like a trapped rat. And then he looked at the empty kitchen. The cold, hard reality of his new life. Jerry, he whispered to the empty room. You bastard. But I was not there to hear him. I was gone. And the echo of his voice was the only answer he was ever going to get. Austin stood by the marble island, his hands trembling so violently that the papers rustled like dry leaves in a gale. The single pendant light above him cast harsh shadows on his face, highlighting the sweat beading on his forehead. He held the first document up to the light, as if praying it was a forgery, but the notary stamp was embossed and real. It was a transfer of title and purchase agreement. Read it, Loretta whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the refrigerator. Read it out loud, Austin. Austin cleared his throat, but the sound that came out was a strangled croak. He swallowed hard and tried again. Property located at 45 Highland Avenue sold in its entirety to Kowalski Commercial Holdings, LLC for the sum of $1.2 million. Closing date immediate. Possession date Sunday, November 12th at 10 a.m. Sunday. Vanessa shrieked, grabbing Austin's arm. That is tomorrow morning. That is in 10 hours. Austin continued reading, his eyes widening with every line. It says here the property has been acquired for commercial redevelopment. The structure is slated for demolition on Monday morning to clear the lot for a multi-level parking facility serving the new stadium district. Demolition. Loretta gasped, clutching her chest. He sold our home to be turned into a parking lot. He is tearing it down. He is not just tearing it down, Austin said, his voice dropping to a horrified whisper. He is erasing it. It says here the previous owner, Jeremiah Stone, retains no liability for contents left on the premises after the possession time. The demolition crew has authorization to bulldoze any remaining structures or personal property. They looked around the empty kitchen. The echo of their own breathing seemed to mock them. There was nothing left to save. Jeremiah had already cleared the house. He knew exactly what was coming. So we are trespassing, Tyrone said, his voice losing its usual bravado. Right now. We are breaking and entering on corporate property. Technically, yes, Austin said, dropping the deed onto the counter. But that is not the worst part. Look at the addendum. He pointed to a paragraph at the bottom of the page. Seller confirms that all occupants are unauthorized squatters with no lease agreement and no legal claim to the property. Buyer is authorized to use law enforcement to remove said occupants immediately upon possession. He called us squatters, Vanessa wailed. He told the new owners we are squatters. You are squatters, Mr. Worthington said, stepping forward from the shadows of the hallway. His voice was cold, devoid of any sympathy. You have no lease. You have no deed. You have no right to be here. And judging by the look of this place, you have no assets either. Austin reached for the second document in the stack. It was thicker, bound with a heavy metal clip. The cover page did not have a bank logo or a legal letterhead. It had the seal of the Department of Corrections. What is that? Tyrone asked, stepping back toward the back door, his eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal. Austin opened the file. A mugshot fell out, sliding across the smooth marble surface. It was a younger Tyrone holding a slate with numbers on it, but it was unmistakably him. The same arrogance in the eyes, the same sneer. It is a background check, Austin said, looking up at Tyrone with a mixture of fear and disgust. A comprehensive one. He began to read from the summary page. Tyrone Marcus Davis, convicted of aggravated assault, armed robbery, and 3 counts of felony fraud. Released on parole in 2015. Currently wanted for questioning in connection with a Ponzi scheme in Nevada and an outstanding warrant for unpaid child support in Georgia totaling $40,000. The room went silent. The only sound was the sharp intake of breath from Mrs. Worthington. She looked at Tyrone as if he were a cockroach that had crawled onto her dinner plate. Fraud, Mr. Worthington repeated the word, tasting it. You let my son marry into a family anchored by a fraudster and a felon. It is a lie, Tyrone shouted, but he did not move toward the papers. He moved closer to the door. Jerry faked that. He is trying to frame me. It looks pretty official to me, Austin said, flipping the page. Here is a copy of the restraining order your ex-wife filed against you, and here is the judgment for the credit card debt you walked away from in 2018. Loretta stared at Tyrone. Her mouth hung open. You told me you were a businessman. You told me you were investing in real estate. I am an investor, Tyrone snapped. Investments take time, Loretta. You do not understand how money works. I understand that you have a warrant, Austin said, holding up the paper. And I understand why Jerry installed those cameras. He knew. He knew exactly who you were. Mr. Worthington snatched the file from Austin's hand. He scanned it quickly, his face turning a deep shade of purple. You brought this man around us, he roared at Austin. You let him drink my wine. You let him shake my hand. Do you have any idea the liability this creates? If the press finds out the Worthington family is associating with wanted criminals, our stock will tank. Dad, I did not know, Austin pleaded. Jerry never said anything. Jerry is the only smart one in this room, Mr. Worthington spat. He gathered the evidence quietly. He protected himself. And you idiot, you walked right into the trap. Vanessa was shaking her head back and forth, her hands covering her ears. Stop it. Stop it. Daddy Tyrone is a good man. He came back for me. He came back for the money, Vanessa, Austin yelled, losing his patience. Look at the file. He owes $40,000 in child support. He did not come back to walk you down the aisle. He came back to hide from the cops and live off Jerry's dime. Tyrone glared at Austin, his hands balling into fists. Watch your mouth, rich boy. You do not know me. I know enough, Austin countered, stepping behind his father for protection. I know you are broke, and I know you are the reason my life is currently in flames. Loretta grabbed the third document. It was the last thing in the envelope. It was not a legal contract. It was not a police record. It was a spreadsheet. Rows and columns of numbers printed in crisp black ink. At the top in bold letters it read, Invoice for services rendered. Loretta's eyes scanned the list. It was exhaustive. It was meticulous. It was 22 years of receipts. Item 1, orthodontic work for Vanessa, age 12, $5,000. Item 2, private tutoring math and science, $3,000. Item 3, bail bond for Marcus Loretta's brother, 1998, $10,000. Item 4, medical bills for Loretta's mother-assisted living facility, 2018 to 2023, $300,000. Item 5, university tuition for Vanessa, $80,000. Item 6, luxury vehicle lease payments for Vanessa, $20,000. Item 7, wedding venue deposit non-refundable. $20,000. The list went on and on, covering every vacation, every emergency, every time I had opened my wallet to solve their problems. Loretta turned to the last page. The grand total was printed in large, bold font. $485,000. Below the total there was a handwritten note in my distinct cursive script. The ink was blue, stark against the white paper. Loretta read it out loud, her voice trembling so hard the words vibrated in the empty kitchen. This debt is considered paid in full. I have deducted it from your inheritance. Since the total value of the inheritance was the house and the savings I have liquidated to pay myself back, the balance is now 0. You are debt-free, and I am family-free. Good luck with the real father. He seems like a man of great resources. Loretta dropped the paper. It fluttered to the floor, landing next to Tyrone's mugshot. He took it all, she whispered. He kept a ledger. All these years he was keeping score. He was not keeping score, Mr. Worthington said, his voice dripping with disdain. He was keeping receipts. And frankly, I admire his accounting. He realized he made a bad investment and he liquidated his position before the market crashed. Austin looked at the total. $485,000. That is almost $500,000. He spent $500,000 on you people. And we treated him like the help. Vanessa sobbed, realizing for the first time the magnitude of her mistake. We told him not to come. We told him he wasn't real family. Well, he certainly is not family now, Mr. Worthington said, buttoning his jacket. He is a free man, and we are leaving. Wait! Austin cried, grabbing his father's arm. What about me? What about the debt? The $100,000 for the venue. That is your debt, Austin, his father said, pulling his arm away. You signed the receipt. You put your name on this disaster. Consider it your tuition for the school of life. But I cannot pay it, Austin stammered. I do not have a job. Then I suggest you get one, Mr. Worthington said. Maybe you can ask Jerry for a reference. I hear he is looking for a new driver since he fired himself. Mrs. Worthington looked at Vanessa. She looked at the stained wedding dress, the ruined makeup, the hysterical tears. I think an annulment is best, she said calmly. It has not been 24 hours. We can claim fraud, which honestly is not far from the truth. No, Vanessa screamed. We are married. We love each other. Austin looked at her. He looked at Tyrone, the felon who was eyeing the silverware. He looked at Loretta, the woman who had cheated on the man who saved her mother. I do not know if I can do this, Vanessa, he whispered. This is too much. My parents are right. This is a circus. He turned to his parents. Take me with you, please. Mr. Worthington nodded. Get in the car, Austin. They walked out, the three of them. The heavy front door, which I had left unlocked for them, swung shut with a final resounding thud. Loretta, Vanessa, and Tyrone were left alone in the empty kitchen. The light from the single pendant bulb flickered overhead. Tyrone looked at the paper on the floor. The invoice. The evidence of the fortune that had slipped through his fingers. So he said, his voice flat. The old man really did it. He took the money, he took the house, and he left us with the bill. Loretta looked at him. For the first time she saw him not as a rugged bad boy, not as a second chance at excitement, but as a dead weight, a liability, a man with a criminal record and empty pockets who had just cost her a comfortable life. You did this, she hissed. You and your greed, you pushed him too far. Me. Tyrone laughed bitter and harsh. You were the one who wanted the car, Loretta. You were the one who wanted to put him in a home. I just went along for the ride. And now the ride is over. He kicked the kitchen island. Well, I am not staying here to watch the bulldozers, he said. I have friends in Chicago. I am out of here. He turned to leave. Wait, Vanessa cried. Daddy, you cannot leave. We have nowhere to go. Tyrone stopped. He looked at his daughter, the daughter he had ignored for 20 years, the daughter he had used to get into my house. Sorry, kid, he said. I am not a father. I am a survivor. And this ship is sinking. He walked out the back door. He disappeared into the night, taking nothing but his own worthlessness. Loretta and Vanessa sank to the floor amidst the papers, the deed, the mugshot, the invoice. They sat in the cold, empty house that would cease to exist in less than 10 hours. They had wanted everything. They had wanted the image, the money, the status. And now they had exactly what they deserved. Nothing. The silence of the house was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. And somewhere, thousands of miles away, I was ordering another drink, toasting to the sweet sound of a balance sheet finally squaring out. The silence in the kitchen was broken not by a sob, but by the cold, calculated voice of Mr. Worthington. He looked at the invoice on the counter, then at his son, and finally at the sobbing bride in her ruined dress. He did not look at Vanessa with pity. He looked at her as if she were a bad stock option he needed to dump before the market opened. "This ends tonight, Austin," Mr. Worthington said. His voice was flat, devoid of any fatherly warmth. It was the voice of a man who closed deals by crushing the opposition. "You are not going back to the hotel with her. You are coming with us. We are calling the family attorney immediately. This marriage is over before it even began." Vanessa looked up, her mascara running in black streaks down her face. "What are you talking about? We are married. We said vows. You cannot just decide it is over. I can and I will, Mr. Worthington replied. "Fraud is grounds for immediate annulment in this state, and this entire relationship was built on fraud. You presented yourself as an heiress to a contracting fortune. You presented your stepfather as a willing benefactor. It was all a lie. You are indigent, Vanessa, and you have dragged my son into a financial crater." Austin stood frozen by the door. He looked at his father, then at Vanessa. He looked at the woman he had promised to love and cherish just hours ago, but Austin had never known struggle. He had never known hunger, and the prospect of facing a $100,000 debt alone terrified him more than losing his wife. "Austin, please," Vanessa begged, reaching out a hand. Tell him we love each other. We can fix this. We can get jobs. We can start over." Austin looked at her hand. He did not take it. He took a step back. He looked at his mother, who was checking her watch as if she were late for a more important appointment. "I cannot do this, Vanessa," Austin whispered. His voice was weak, a pathetic sound in the empty room. "My dad is right. You lied to me. You told me Jerry would pay for everything. You told me the money was guaranteed. I thought it was," Vanessa cried. "He always pays." "Well, he is not paying now, is he?" Austin snapped, his fear turning into anger. "He left us with nothing, and I am not going to ruin my credit and my future because you cannot control your family." He turned to his father. "I am ready to go." Mr. Worthington nodded. "Smart choice, son. Let us go. Do not bring anything that you did not pay for, which I assume is everything." They walked out. Mrs. Worthington led the way, her heels clicking on the hardwood. Mr. Worthington followed, his hand firmly on Austin's shoulder, guiding him like a prisoner. Austin did not look back. He did not say goodbye. He walked out the door and out of Vanessa's life, leaving her kneeling on the cold floor of a house that was scheduled for demolition. The sound of their car engine fading into the distance was the final bell tolling for Vanessa's fairy tale. She was alone, or so she thought, but she was not alone. Tyrone and Loretta were still there, standing in the shadows of the kitchen. Tyrone had watched the Worthingtons leave with a look of pure calculation on his face. He had realized minutes ago that the gravy train had derailed. He had realized that there was no big house, no rich son-in-law, and no easy retirement. He looked at Loretta. He looked at the woman he had manipulated, the woman he had seduced back into his life with promises of being a real family. But Tyrone did not do family. He did opportunities. And this opportunity had just dried up. Loretta wiped her eyes and looked at him, hope flickering in her gaze. "Well, Ty," she said, her voice trembling, "it is just us now, like it was supposed to be. We will figure this out. We can stay at your place in the city until we get on our feet." Tyrone laughed. It was a harsh, ugly sound that bounced off the marble walls. "My place. You think I have a place, Loretta? I was staying with my cousin on a couch before I came here. I came here because you told me this guy was loaded. You told me the house was ours. You told me he was a pushover who would sign over the deed. He was supposed to—" Loretta stammered, backing away from the look in his eyes. "He always does what I say. I do not know what happened. He changed." "He did not change," Tyrone spat, stepping closer. "You played me. You dragged me out here with your lies about the good life. You promised me a payday, Loretta. You promised me easy street. And now look at me. I have warrants. I have debt. And I have nothing to show for it." He reached out and grabbed her by the shoulders. His fingers dug into her flesh. "You are useless," he hissed. "You are just an old woman with no money and a lot of baggage. Why would I want you?" "Tyrone, please," Loretta cried. "I love you. We have a history. History does not pay the rent, Tyrone shouted. He raised his hand. The movement was fast, violent, and practiced. He slapped her, hard. Loretta fell back against the counter, holding her cheek, her eyes wide with shock. He had never hit her before. Not when they were young, not in the last few weeks. But the mask was off now. The charmer was gone. The predator remained. "You tricked me," Tyrone yelled, looming over her. "You made me think I was walking into a gold mine, and you led me into a trap. That old man outsmarted you. He outsmarted all of us. And you let him." He turned and kicked the kitchen island, his boot leaving a black scuff mark on the white stone. He looked around the empty room, searching for anything of value, anything he could salvage from this disaster. His eyes landed on the key rack by the back door. Hanging there was a single key. It was the key to the vintage Harley-Davidson in the garage. The bike I had bought as a wreck 5 years ago and restored piece by piece. The bike I had just spent $3,000 fixing last month because Loretta said Tyrone wanted to ride it for the wedding entrance. He grabbed the key. "I am taking the bike," he said. "Consider it payment for my time." "You cannot take the bike," Loretta sobbed. "It is Jerry S. He will call the police." "Let him call," Tyrone sneered. "I will be 3 states away by morning. And you. Do not follow me. Do not call me. If I see you again, Loretta, I will finish what I started." He walked out the back door. A moment later, the roar of the motorcycle engine shattered the night silence. The sound faded quickly, disappearing into the darkness, just like the man who rode it. Loretta slid down the cabinets until she hit the floor. She sat there in the darkness, her cheek throbbing, her heart breaking. Vanessa crawled over to her, dragging the heavy fabric of her wedding dress. Mother and daughter sat together on the floor of the empty kitchen, holding each other amidst the wreckage of their own making. The house began to cool down. I had set the thermostat to shut off completely at midnight. The chill crept in from the windows, settling into the bones of the house. It was November, and the night was freezing. There was no furniture to sit on. There were no blankets to wrap themselves in. There was no food in the fridge. There was no water running from the tap because I had shut off the main valve before I left. They were alone. Truly, completely alone. Loretta looked around the dark room. The moonlight streamed in through the uncurtained windows, casting long, ghostly shadows on the floor. She shivered. "We have to call him." "Vanessa," whispered, her teeth chattering. "We have to call Jerry. He will fix this. He always fixes this." Loretta shook her head. "He is gone, Vanessa. You saw the papers. He sold the house. He cannot just leave us here," Vanessa cried. "He is my dad. Sort of. He raised me. He will not let us freeze. Call him Mom. Please, tell him we are sorry. Tell him we will do anything." Loretta reached into her purse. Her hand shook as she pulled out her phone. The screen was cracked from when she dropped it earlier. She dialed the number she knew by heart, the number she had called 1,000 times to ask for money, to ask for favors, to ask for rescue. She put the phone to her ear. It rang, once, twice, 3 times. "Please pick up," she whispered to the darkness. "Please, Jerry, pick up." Thousands of miles away, I sat in the first-class lounge of a layover airport. I was drinking a glass of aged scotch. My phone was on the table in front of me. I saw the name on the screen, Loretta. I watched it ring. I did not feel anger. I did not feel sadness. I felt a profound sense of closure. I picked up the phone. I did not say hello. I just listened. Jerry Loretta's voice was a ragged sob. "Jerry, please. We are at the house. It is cold. Tyrone left. Austin left. We have nothing. Please come back. We are sorry. We made a mistake. Please, Jerry. We need you." I took a sip of my scotch. The liquid was warm and smooth. "I warned you, Loretta," I said. My voice was calm, steady. "I told you to enjoy the moment. I told you the music was going to stop." "Jerry, please," she wailed. "They are going to tear the house down. We have nowhere to go." "You have the money you stole," I said. "You have the jewelry you hid. You have the lessons you taught me. Use them. Jerry, do not do this. You are a good man. You are a provider." "I was a provider," I corrected her. Past tense. "The contract is terminated, Loretta. You fired me, remember? You told me I was just the help. Well, the help has quit. I am your wife, she screamed. You are a squatter, I said. And the owners are coming in the morning. I suggest you leave before they call the police. Jerry, no, wait. I pulled the phone away from my ear. I looked at it for a second. Then I pressed the button to end the call. I did not just hang up. I took the SIM card out of the phone. I snapped it in half. I dropped the pieces into his empty glass. I signaled the waiter for the check. I had a flight to catch. The plane was going to Portugal, a place where the sun was warm, where the coffee was strong, and where nobody knew my name. Back in the cold, dark kitchen, Loretta stared at her silent phone. The line was dead. The connection was severed. She looked at Vanessa, who was waiting with wide, hopeful eyes. He is coming, right? Vanessa asked. He is coming to get us. Loretta lowered the phone. She looked at the empty room. She looked at the red writing on the envelope. Paid in full. No baby, she whispered. He is not coming. He is never coming back. The reality settled over them like a shroud. They were alone in the dark in a house that hated them, waiting for the sun to rise on a day that would bring nothing but bulldozers and consequences. The vibration of the phone in my hand felt distant, like a tremor from an earthquake that had happened on another continent. I was sitting in the first-class lounge at JFK Airport, waiting for the final leg of my journey to Lisbon. The glass walls offered a view of the tarmac, where massive engines were roaring to life, ready to carry people away from their mistakes. I looked at the screen. It was Loretta again. This was the 5th time she had called in the last 10 minutes. I debated letting it go to voicemail, but I knew that if I did not answer, she would keep calling. She would keep hoping, and hope was a luxury I could no longer afford to give her. I pressed the green button and lifted the phone to my ear. I did not speak. I let the silence stretch across the miles, across the years of wasted affection, across the emptiness of the house I had left behind. Jerry. Her voice was a jagged shard of glass. Jerry, please say something. We are still in the kitchen. It is freezing. The power just went out. Tyrone took the bike. He took the bike and left us. Vanessa is having a panic attack. We have nowhere to go. I took a sip of the sparkling water the attendant had placed on my table. The bubbles fizzed on my tongue. I told you, Loretta, I said, my voice calm and devoid of the tremors that used to plague me when she yelled. I told you the music was going to stop. You were dancing too hard to hear the silence coming. You cannot leave us like this, she wailed. I am your wife. Vanessa is your daughter. No, I corrected her. You are the woman who cheated on me in my own house, and Vanessa is the woman who told me I was not her real father. You both wanted independence. You wanted to be free of the boring old contractor. You wanted the excitement of Tyrone and the prestige of the Worthingtons. Well, you have it. You are free. Jerry, please, she sobbed, her pride finally shattered by the cold reality of the dark kitchen. We have no money. The accounts are empty. You have assets, I said. You have a closet full of designer clothes I paid for. You have jewelry. Sell it, pawn it, start over. That is what I did when I was 20. That is what I am doing now. But we do not know how, she whispered. Then learn, I said. I heard Vanessa in the background screaming something about her dress, about how cold she was. It sounded like the tantrum of a child who has finally been told no for the first time in her life. Jerry, come back. We can fix this. I will make it up to you. You cannot afford me, Loretta, I said. My rates have gone up, and you are bankrupt. I pulled the phone away from my ear. I looked at the little plastic rectangle that connected me to my old life. It was a tether, a chain. Do not call this number again, I said. This line is disconnected, just like us. I did not wait for her response. I pressed the end call button. Then, with a strength that felt satisfyingly final, I dug my thumbnail into the side of the phone and popped open the SIM card tray. I took out the small chip. It held my number, my contacts, my history. I snapped it in half. The plastic crunched. I dropped the pieces into my empty water glass. I stood up and walked to the gate. The flight attendant smiled at me. Welcome aboard, Mr. Stone, she said. Thank you, I replied. It is good to be going. I boarded the plane, and as the engine spooled up, pushing me back into the soft leather seat, I closed my eyes. The sound of the ocean was already in my ears, drowning out the phantom echoes of Loretta's pleading voice. 6 months later, the world looked very different. For Vanessa, the world looked like the inside of a diner called the Rusty Spoon, located 3 towns over from where she used to live. She was wearing a uniform that was 2 sizes too big and comfortable shoes that were a far cry from the Louboutins she used to demand. She wiped the counter with a gray rag, her movements slow and tired. She had 6 tables and they were all demanding coffee. Her hands were chapped from the cleaning chemicals. She looked at the clock. 4 more hours until her shift ended. 4 more hours until she could go back to the studio apartment she shared with 2 other girls and eat instant noodles. The debt collectors called her every day. The $100,000 for the wedding venue had defaulted. The credit card companies were suing her. She had tried to sell the Vera Wang dress, but because it was stained with wine and tears, she only got a few $100s for it at a consignment shop. A customer waved a menu at her. "Hey, Miss More Coffee over here." "Coming," she muttered, forcing a smile that did not reach her eyes. She walked past the newsstand by the door. A local society paper was sitting on the rack. The headline caught her eye. "Worthington heir weds shipping magnate daughter in lavish Hamptons ceremony." Vanessa froze. There on the front page was Austin. He looked handsome, happy, and completely unbothered. He was smiling at a blonde woman who looked like she had been born wearing pearls. They were on a yacht, they were drinking champagne. Austin had survived. He had run back to his parents, apologized, and let them bail him out. He had erased Vanessa from his history like a stain on a silk shirt. He never called, he never wrote, he just moved on to someone who had actual money, someone his parents approved of. Vanessa felt a tear slide down her cheek. She wiped it away angrily with her apron. She had wanted that life. She had been so close, but she had bet on the wrong horse. She had bet on image instead of substance. And now she was paying the bill. "Hey, waitress!" the customer yelled again. "Coffee. Today." "Right away," Sir Vanessa said, swallowing her pride. It was a bitter pill, but she was getting used to the taste. Loretta was not doing much better. She was living in a state-subsidized apartment complex on the south side of the city. It was a small one-bedroom unit with thin walls and a radiator that clanked all night. She sat in her second-hand armchair staring at the small television I had not bought. She looked older. The stress of the last 6 months had etched deep lines into her face that no amount of cheap cream could hide. Her hair, once dyed and styled weekly, was now graying at the roots. Tyrone was gone. He had lasted exactly 3 days after the wedding disaster. Once he realized there was no money to steal and no house to squat in, he had vanished, taking the motorcycle and the last of Loretta's cash. She heard rumors that he was in Detroit running a scam on another widow, but she did not have the energy to care. She looked around her small apartment. It was clean, but it was sad. There were no dinner parties here, no galas, no expensive wines, just the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of her neighbors arguing through the wall. She thought about me often. She thought about the way I used to make her coffee in the morning, bringing it to her in bed. She thought about the way I fixed things before she even knew they were broken. She thought about the security I provided, the blanket of safety she had taken for granted and then set on fire. She picked up her phone and scrolled through her old photos. Pictures of us in the garden, pictures of the house, pictures of a life that felt like a dream she had woken up from screaming. She dialed my old number. She knew it was disconnected. She knew I would never answer, but she dialed it anyway just to hear the operator tell her that the number was no longer in service. It was her penance, a reminder that some doors once closed never open again. I put down my glass of Vinho Verde and looked out at the Atlantic Ocean. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and violet that no painter could ever capture. I was sitting on the terrace of my villa in the Algarve region of Portugal. The air smelled of salt and grilled fish and jasmine. It was a simple life compared to the one I had built in the States, but it was rich in ways that mattered. I had a small workshop in the back where I built furniture for the local orphanage. I had a garden where I grew tomatoes and peppers. And I had peace. "Jeremiah, are you ready for dinner?" I turned around. Elena was standing in the doorway holding a bowl of olives. She was a retired professor of history, a woman with laugh lines around her eyes and a mind as sharp as a tack. We had met at the local market 3 months ago, arguing over the ripeness of a melon. "I am ready," I said, smiling at her. She walked over and sat next to me, placing her hand over mine. Her hand was warm. It was an honest hand. She knew about my past. I had told her everything. About Vanessa, about Loretta, about the house. She had listened without judging, without calculating. "You are thinking about them?" she asked softly, sensing my mood. Briefly, I admitted. I was thinking about how heavy I used to feel, like I was carrying a backpack full of stones. And now I feel like I am floating. She squeezed my hand. "Good, because I made that seafood stew you like, and it would be a shame to eat it with a heavy heart." I laughed. It was a genuine sound, deep and rumbling. I looked at her. I looked at the ocean. I looked at the life I had built from the ashes of my betrayal. I did not want revenge anymore. I did not need it. Seeing them suffer was not what brought me joy. What brought me joy was this: the freedom, the respect, the knowledge that I was loved not for what I could provide, but for who I was. I picked up my wine glass. To independence, I said. To new beginnings. Elena answered, clinking her glass against mine. I took a sip. The wine was crisp and cold. The sun dipped below the horizon, turning the ocean dark. Vanessa was wiping tables. Loretta was sitting in the dark. Austin was living a shallow lie. And I was here, finally home. The invoice was paid. The ledger was balanced. And for the first time in 25 years, I was not just a provider. I was a man. And that was the greatest victory of all. I learned that family is not defined by DNA, but by loyalty and respect. For decades, I mistook financial dependency for love, allowing myself to be reduced to a mere utility bill. But kindness is not weakness, and silence is not submission. When the people you love treat you like an ATM, you have the right to close the account. My story is a reminder that it is never too late to reclaim your dignity. True wealth isn't the money in the bank. It is the peace of knowing you are valued for who you are, not what you can buy. What would you have done in my place? Would you have left them a cent? Let me know in the comments below, and please subscribe for more stories of justice served cold.